Good afternoon. Oh, hello, Sid. How's it going?
Oh, good, good. I saw the movie, by the way.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Yeah, I saw it too. Let's just get this warmed up here. We are Box Office Revival. It's noon. It's the flagship show, our Box Office and Beyond show, talking about the weekend box office results and what we see trending. We're going to get into the streaming results now a little bit now that Netflix is talking about their top 10 most viewed in terms of hours. They have a new site. We can take a look at that. We've got movies to look forward to for Thanksgiving, including House of Gucci and Encanto. So we will also talk about the Ghostbusters franchise. Do we see a future for the franchise? Because clearly they want to make more of these movies. And before we do the plow through of the weekend box office, I just want to ping people in here to make sure they know that we are live and raring to go. Thank you for the patience there. All right. Welcome to the box office revival. And what a revival we have here with Ghostbusters Afterlife doing an estimated $44 million this weekend, beating expectations, getting so close to that last Ghostbusters picture. We'll talk about just how solid this opening is. In at number two, Eternals with an estimated $10.8 million, down 60%, with a running tally of nearly $136 million. Number three was Clifford the Big Red Dog, down 51% to an estimated $8.1 million for a total of 33.5 so far. Debuting at number four was King Richard with an estimated $5.7 million. And rounding out the top five was Dune with 3.1 million, down 45% with a running tally of over $98 million. It will cross $100 million in a matter of days now. So that's your top five. Not much else going on at the box office. Venom held up again, down only 29% to 2.8 million. It's got a 206.5 million running tally, second highest grossing movie of the year so far, and actually did better than James Bond this weekend. No Time to Die dropped to number 7 with 2.7 million, down 40% with nearly $155 million total. But the top story, of course, is Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now I'm going to put some links here so we can all see the stats together here. Let me draw up our Ghostbusters franchise. Here we go. I'm going to pin that link for you. There we go. So as you see, the by far the number one Ghostbusters movie is that first one from 1984. It was the second highest grossing picture to come from that year behind Beverly Hills Cop, but they were both all-time blockbusters, and Ghostbusters did have a number of re-releases, as you see. 5 years later was Ghostbusters 2, which was a big step down in terms of overall box office, but to be fair, when it opened, it set the opening weekend record. It did like 29 million or so here, and that was the opening weekend record at the time, believe it or not. Though soon after, it was eclipsed by Batman, which set the bar even higher, busting loose with $40 million. But just to be fair, there was a high level of anticipation for Ghostbusters 2 when it came out. It just didn't last in theaters as long. Then the franchise was pretty much dormant after that. It seemed like it was that usual second movie slump. They tried to resurrect it with, I believe, there was a video game in 2009. Anyone who knows video games, please come up and talk to me about that. In my research and just following things, people considered that to be like the true Ghostbusters 3 or gave fans hope. Although it was always odd to me that that first movie was enough to make it a franchise for fans, but I guess that speaks to how good that first 1984 picture was. Anyway, instead of continuing the story, they rebooted it in 2016, and that 2016 Ghostbusters actually opened to $46 million and ended up with over $128 million. Now, that movie is much maligned, but nonetheless, it was relatively popular. I mean, 46 million is a solid opening, even in 2016, even pre-pandemic. A lot of people went to see it. I guess the problem is that not that many people liked it, presumably. And we can talk about that. Now, 5 years later, we have Ghostbusters Afterlife opening to $44 million, just $2 million shy of Ghostbusters 2016. That is a win if you consider that a sequel is often a referendum on how people felt about the previous picture. So, this new movie, Afterlife, had to overcome people's utter disdain for Ghostbusters 2016. And on top of that, it was taking a totally different tone or vibe from Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. So, to the Ghostbusters fanboy, it wasn't necessarily going to be a pure Ghostbusters movie. I mean, we already know that Harold Ramis had passed away, so presumably he's not in it. And this franchise has had a lot of problems getting the gang back together. But evidently, people got the hint that this would be, at the very least, more of a fan service type picture, and that it was maybe taking the franchise in a different direction, but while still honoring those original Ghostbusters, or at least the all the uh, all the good stuff that people liked about it. Although they didn't have Slimer in it, but that's another story. So, considering the change in pace and the disaster that was Ghostbusters 2016, that makes this $44 million actually more impressive than Ghostbusters 2016's $46 million. Because we saw what happens when you have a terrible first movie and then try to revive it 5 years later. 5 years ago, 5 years ago was Suicide Squad, big blockbuster, but people didn't like it. Now, 5 years later, they do The Suicide Squad, and it only does a fraction of the business of that first Suicide Squad picture. So, for Ghostbusters Afterlife to come so close to its maligned predecessor is what makes it extra special in a lot of ways. And it has Thanksgiving as its second weekend, it has the holidays to look forward to, and a pretty clear field in terms of people competition for this type of movie. So the runway is clear for Ghostbusters to for Ghost the runway is clear for Ghostbusters Afterlife to actually potentially possibly outgross Ghostbusters 2016, but we can talk about that as well. If you guys think it has the gas to take it past the $128 million of that previous Ghostbusters movie. So, so Sid, what do you think of this number, this 44 million debut?
Yeah, I think it's great. It's pretty good, and I think it's more than what even the studio was predicting. So it's a good thing for it. I hope this proves to be a sleeper because it's a really good film, and I think it's done better than expected. Expected, yeah. I think the predictions were around 30, so it did pretty much well then.
That's right. The projections were at most 35 million, at least amongst the industry insiders, so to speak. And Sony, the distributor itself, was saying 27, $28 million, and myself included, I was kind of not terribly confident in it, especially after what happened to Suicide Squad, and the fact that when I go to look for showtimes here, it was very easy to get seats for the IMAX or the Dolby. I ended up seeing it in Dolby because I prefer the black levels. But so I was a little bit uh, pleasantly surprised here. It's nice to see the picture overperform. It's good for the movie, the franchise, and the box office for this sort of thing to happen. But yes, I admit I was yet again somebody trying to bring the expectations down lower. Some might say it's a strategy. You lower the expectations so when the movie beats it, everyone's happy and surprised and celebrating. But that's not necessarily my intent, but I'm just saying it's important to have realistic expectations because there have been a lot of unrealistic expectations regarding other pictures such as Eternals and Dune and whatnot. So we always just want to keep it real here at the Box Office Revival. Even if this picture did 30 million, it wouldn't have been a disaster. But now that it did 44 million, hey, that's quite good, and something we like to see going on at the box office. Now, going through the rest of the movies here, We have Eternals down 60%. And that was a little bit concerning. What do you guys think about the Eternals taking a 60% hit this weekend? I mean, we were kind of okay with it dropping 60% that second weekend, but now 60% in the third weekend. That is can be a bit of a concern because we're hoping these pictures stabilize after that second weekend drop that they've been getting. Let's double check what Black Widow dropped at the same point. Black Widow was down 55%. So Eternal's third weekend is now smaller than Black Widow's third weekend. Black Widow did 11.6 in that third weekend and had about 155 total. So Eternals is about 135 for frame of reference. Now, Shang-Chi had the month of September to itself, and that means it got to cling to all of its screens, including its premium screens, whereas Eternals lost its premium screens, or at least most of its premium screens, to Ghostbusters this weekend, which can account for some of that drop. Shang-Chi, though, was down only 38% in its third weekend. Again, helped by being able to keep all of its screens. For a further frame of reference, let's check out Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And it was only down 48% in its third weekend. It did 16.5 million. And then lastly, I just want to take a look at Dune, which is probably the closest to Eternals in terms of fantasy sci-fi genre. And Dune itself was down about 50% in its third weekend. So yeah, Eternals took a hefty hit this weekend. What do you guys think about that? Is that cause for concern at all? What do you think about that, Sid? Why do you think Eternals took a hit this weekend?
Well, I think it has more to do with the loss of all the premium screens, and I think all the people that needed to be a part of the conversation in terms of spoilers or something already saw it in its first 2 weekends. So if they wanted to, and I think now we're heading towards Thanksgiving. I think also Ghostbusters has taken a few of like the spot, and I think that's the only reason.
Sure, that makes sense. And I think also, maybe as we talked about before, ad nauseum, you could say, uh, the picture does have perhaps a more limited appeal than Shang-Chi or even Venom. That's maybe where we see that nature of this picture kicking in here. And so we'll keep a closer eye on it to see if it can make it to Christmas, because that is the goal for these pictures right now, given how clear the schedule is for the most part. Well, then you have Clifford the Big Red Dog dropping 51%. Again, it's the second weekend. In this era, we're more concerned about the later weekends. Big second weekend drops are to be expected. Now, debuting at number 4 was King Richard, which was a simultaneous release on HBO Max and did just $5.7 million, which seems like a bit of a disappointment, even with the HBO Max. Remember, Dune had HBO Max and opened to $41 million. Completely different pictures, but being on HBO Max doesn't necessarily mean you can't have a sizable opening. Some could say that it's the nature of the audience. This probably plays much older, and they are less likely to go out to the theaters. They're just going to kick it back at home and see it on HBO Max. We don't have numbers for that HBO Max debut, but typically the HBO Max numbers mirror the box office in a lot of ways. So if it was weak at the box office, it was also likely weak on HBO Max. So we'll see if King Richard bucks that trend and actually had a robust HBO Max debut. But this is yet another bust or disappointing number for a Will Smith sports biopic. He was in Concussion, and that was a disappointment. And then 20 years ago or so, he starred as Muhammad Ali, which was not one of his higher grossing movies. It was much more popular than these pictures, but it was a bit of a disappointment. A very expensive movie that kind of fizzled at the box office. So that's another strike for that subgenre for Will Smith, it seems. And but if anyone saw King Richard or Ghostbusters or any of these other pictures for the first time, second time, third time, what have you, you're welcome to the stage, and we can discuss what you guys thought of these pictures and why do you think King Richard was a bit of a bust, and why do you think Ghostbusters Afterlife excelled, relatively speaking? Again, 44 million, just 2 million shy of 46 million of the Ghostbusters 2016. And given the context here, delayed movie, still in a pandemic, feeling the after effects of that terrible 2016 movie. And hey, if you don't like me saying that movie is terrible, that 2016 movie, again, you're welcome on the stage and we can discuss that as well. If there are any fans of that 2016 debacle, no offense, but it was, despite what Rotten Tomatoes says. That's not the authority on anything, Rotten Tomatoes. It's just simply a collecting all the reviews and if they were thumbs up or thumbs down, and then basically giving a score after that. And effectively, a movie could be a D minus and get 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Theoretically, that is possible. So it does not. Ghostbusters 2016 has a 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't mean it's a C. That just means 74% of critics gave it a passing grade. Ghostbusters Afterlife has a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't mean it's a D minus movie either. It's just that 62% rated it positively. I'm not sure if anyone has any info on this, how they do the audience score, but on the audience score, Ghostbusters 2016 is at 49%, and Ghostbusters Afterlife stands at 96%. So a bit of a disparity between the audience and the critics here. Oh, hello, Emma. Welcome to the stage.
Hi. Sorry, I got a bit of a sticky throat. Hi, Brandon. Hi.
What say you? Did you get to see Ghostbusters or?
I watched it. Yeah, I watched Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I have to admit it's so much better than the 2016 with all the whole women cast. I think it was just based on nostalgia, which was really good, and it didn't recycle the old um you know, the first original Ghostbusters was so original about teamwork and based in like being exterminators, and also adding comedy and also the supernatural element to the movie. But with this original is with this Ghostbuster Afterlife, I felt that it brought a lot of nostalgia but a lot of originality to it as well, because we get to see a lot about family. I don't want to spoil. Can I say spoilers? Is that okay to say spoilers, Ray? Is that okay?
Oh, it depends on how spoilery. We're not quite talking spoilers just yet because I know 44 million domestic. That's like roughly 3.5 million people. That's like
Yeah,
1% of the population has gone to see this picture. Yeah, I just would any major and if it's not in the trailer, if it's in the
yeah.
trailer, we can talk about it.
Okay. I definitely feel that this movie is. I just think, yeah, I've personally felt that this movie is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. There is some nitpicks that I do have about the movie, but I'll see what everybody else say and I'll join in.
Okay, great. And why did you go see it? That's also always part of the question here at Box Office Revival. Uh, what was it about this new picture that made you want to actually go to the movie theaters to see Ghostbusters Afterlife?
I think Ghostbusters has the best quotes. Like, I can't even explain. Like, I remember my favorite quote was, is she, are you a god? And then, Ray would say no. And also, uh, oh, I just, is it, I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, is like, I think the quotes to the movies are really great because it's just so, it's just part of pop culture, and it's been reused in other movies, and there's a lot of influence as well. And I think that's what really drew me to it, because I'm such a big fan of the yeah the film itself.
Great. Nice. Yes, it is. It is very quotable. Just about every line. We can talk about that later, but first I want to introduce Weird Beard the Gray. Is that how you like to be referred to? Or please update me if you want. If you have a different nomenclature. So how? So did you get to see Ghostbusters Afterlife? And if you did, why did you see it? And what did you think?
Hey, thanks for bringing me up. You can call me Jay or Gray if that's easier. Um, I am a lifetime Ghostbusters fan. I was part of the first generation. I was there in '84. So I'm probably one of the most, I'm part of the group that's the most cynical, outspoken, we own this, so make it for me kind of crowd. I don't see the franchise that way, but a lot of my contemporaries do, which is unfortunate. Um, I was a fan of Ghostbusters 2 and the real Ghostbusters. I wasn't particularly fond of the 2016 reboot, but I really enjoyed this film. I think Jason Reitman and Ivan Reitman made some great choices in terms of how they wanted to tell this particular story, and I think Sony learned from the marketing debacle that was the 2016 and how to market this film to a multi-generational audience. It probably also learned lessons from Star Wars and Star Trek reboots to try and appeal to a broader audience by targeting different audiences as opposed to trying to hit everybody with the same message at once. Like in 2016, we saw both casts at the same time filling stages on the talk shows, and this was a ceremonial passing of the torch, which really set them up. It was a really high bar for them to achieve. Even it just you having Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson in the room saying how wonderful this movie is and how great these quote unquote women are. Uh, really set them up to fail in a way. I think it wasn't that great of a movie. And I think when audiences went in expecting the same kind of comedy, the same kind of story, uh, it wasn't there. So I think when Sony decided to split it up and be very frank in the trailers that this is one part nostalgia but a completely new story, they were very honest, and I think that was the best way that they could market this to the broadest audience. But then in the final weeks, when they started splitting the teams up, you started to see the original OGs on like Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon after the kids have gone to bed, and then the younger actors and Paul Rudd were on the morning shows talking about this. So they knew they were talking to different audiences, and I think that really resonated enough to get them past that weekend estimate and put them far and above. And it was probably the first movie I've seen in the theater where actually people were laughing and they were having a good time. And I could see across the theater, even though the theaters weren't packed, you could see that there were families there with young kids who were enjoying it, and then the OGs like me who were liking it for different reasons. So I think a marketing strategy was brilliant.
And the proof is in this number, this $44 million number. Um, and it's important to note just that a lot of movies, a lot of people think that it might be a low number, but again, it's relative. You got to have the right perspective. What is this movie? Where does it stand in the market? What did the previous movie do? And just again, to overcome that sentiment for the 2016. Jay, did you say you were not a fan of that 2016? Just to be clear.
As I don't want to. I don't want to shit on the Ghostbusters family, but I think it is the runt of the litter.
Yes, yes, and it's not because it didn't honor or whatever. I know a lot of people were concerned about that as fans, but I think it just as a movie itself, regardless, just take away the Ghostbusters baggage, it just didn't work as a comedy or it just went on and on and on, much like my rants here sometimes just doesn't stop. But anyway, uh, yes, that's an excellent. I'm glad you liked the movie. And what do you guys think about this Rotten Tomatoes thing where Ghostbusters Afterlife is rated lower than this Ghostbusters 2016, lower by the critics but much higher by the audience?
I I have a problem with a pass fail grade in Rotten Tomatoes, and sometimes when you read more detailed critics, the nuances are telling. How do they determine if somebody's being very critical but positive over somebody that just says, no, I don't recommend this movie, it's garbage. So it's difficult. I if I'm gonna support it and say, hey, look, the rating's high, it must be good, and I can't criticize it when there's a negative score about a movie that I hate. So I think it's arbitrary. I think it's just a guide like any other aggregate, but it's a good starting point like Wikipedia. But you got to make up your own mind, take your own entertainment.
Excellent advice. I agree, Jay. Jesse, welcome to the stage.
Yeah, I just came in real quick to say that I called it when we talked about this the other day.
Oh, right. You were on the over here. You bet the
Yes,
over.
if you
Oh,
recall, I
very
remember
good.
saying that I think it was going to get over 40 somehow.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations. You did it. Yes. That was a bold over there, and look how it worked out. Worked out great. Did you get to see the picture, by the way?
No, I haven't. I'll still catch it eventually, but I'm just, again, I've mentioned this before. I'm not a big fan of the Ghostbusters in general. I just never found the movies to be very good. But yeah, I'll check it out eventually, probably while it's still in theaters.
And does this opening weekend, does it make you more likely to see it, that it actually beat the numbers and did 44 million,
Oh no, I
or
don't
like it
care at
dis?
all how much money something makes. It doesn't affect my interest in watching it. I was never gonna watch it like opening weekend or even the second weekend. I was probably just gonna make my way to it when I didn't have much going on. I mean, I'm happy for it. I mean, I think it's fine. It's cool when the business is doing well in general, but it doesn't affect my interest.
Fair enough. And to Jay's point about Rotten Tomatoes, the box office should not affect your interest per se. But that's why I asked the question, because sometimes if something is really popular, people just want to check it out to see what the fuss is about. And so that's the idea there. But you should still always make up your own mind whether the movie has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes or has a box office record. That does not necessarily speak to the actual quality of the movie, and it can be, in fact, be arbitrary, or it can be based on the marketing. It can be based on a variety of factors. But always make your own judgments on this front, or anything for that matter, I should say. And if you want to see a movie, I would never let the critics or the box office deter you from seeing a movie that you want to see. Now, I guess they can be helpful when you're on the fence about something, like I don't, but if it's something you saw the trailer or saw the synopsis or the director, or the cast, or whatever, and you decided you want to see it, I say go for it and make up your own mind. Totally. So, all right. Again, congratulations, Jesse, on betting the over. And Sid, what did you bet the over or the under on the 35 million opening here?
Actually, I did not bet anything. I was just curious. Like, I was going more in the line of projections. I was like, whatever the projections are being made, like, if it does that, that's good for the film. And it's good to see that it didn't make over. But I remember Jesse making that over the 40 projection last time.
Yeah, I do anticipate this having a good holdover just with the Thanksgiving weekend next weekend. A lot of families will go out, so I wouldn't be shocked if it does pretty well next weekend, but it'll probably drop off a cliff after that.
That's probably true. I know that the latest campaign is "Take Your Family to Ghostbusters," with Ivan and Jason saying it's all about family over and over again. So they're hoping for that hard, steady hold this next.
Yeah, I would say anything over 15 million next weekend would be a win for them,
Is it
but I would
roughly?
anticipate more in the 20 to 25 range.
Is it roughly after the first? Is it the second and the third week it dropped by 50% or 40%?
That usually happens after the first week.
Is it the first week? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. This year we've been getting severe second weekend drop offs.
60,
Sometimes
70%
as
often.
Sometimes, yes, sometimes that's high, and it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world for the picture. I mean, Dune dropped like 62% in its second weekend, yet it's still about to cross $100 million in total because it leveled off after that. And that was my concern
Mm.
earlier about Eternals, because Eternals has not leveled off yet. It dropped another 60%. Um, what will help these pictures is that it's Thanksgiving weekend. Kids are off school. Many kids are off school on Monday. Can you believe that? When I was in school, we never got Monday and Tuesday off. We still had school, but many are off on Monday. And so those will be big kids' days. And Wednesday, not so much. The day before Thanksgiving is a travel day and typically lower at the box office. But then Thanksgiving is a solid day at the box office. And then your Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I think it's going to still be in the mix for the second weekend. And then the question is, can any of these new pictures top Ghostbusters? We have Disney's Encanto, the cartoon, House of Gucci, and Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. So we've got, I guess, an original Disney cartoon based on a true story drama crime thriller starring Lady Gaga and Al Pacino and a bunch of other people. And then we have a franchise reboot of Resident Evil. So do you think you guys see any of those pictures unseating Ghostbusters?
I think
I,
Encanto
per-
could be close.
I
Um,
personally don't think it will happen.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Encanto has a chance. I don't know that it will. But no, Resident Evil will probably do under 5 million. It doesn't seem to be of interest to anybody that I know of. House of Gucci is pretty niche, so I could see that hitting like third or fourth place in the market. That's a movie I'm very excited about. But yeah, I don't know. I think Encanto might be close. I think they'll both hover in like the 15 to 20. Ghostbusters and Encanto, but I don't think any of the other ones have a chance. What's House of Gucci projected at? I haven't even looked, but I would imagine it's got to be like 10 to 13 million or something.
Oh yeah, I think yeah, House of Gucci definitely has some zest to it, especially with the marketing and the star power. I mean, arguably the most star power of any picture this season. And I think with that kind of banger of a trailer, they're probably good for over 10 million, even for the proper weekend. I mean, they could post a very strong opening, unlike Ridley Scott's last picture, which was The Last Duel. That was quite the flop, but I think this is a totally different story.
A real
Something that,
tragedy on that too, because in my opinion, The Last Duel is the best movie of the year so far.
wow, I still haven't seen it. Again, I would, if there was on a good screen, I would have gone to see it. I just don't want to waste my first viewing of any movie anymore on a really bad screen with no contrast, just murky, especially if it has any night scenes or dark scenes. That's why I selected Dolby over IMAX, because even the Dolby has better blacks than the IMAX. But yeah, the Last Duel stuff, especially with the length of that picture, the scope of it, it seems like you need to have a really good screen to enjoy that. But House of Gucci, it seems a little trashier. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have the most pristine screen, I guess, for that. So I think that has that going for it, given this subject matter. But nonetheless, I do see that being a pretty popular movie, at least in comparison to things like The Last Duel and King Richard. And Kanto is a bit of a wild card because Disney doesn't always hit it out of the park. I mean, Raya the Last Dragon had a soft opening, but that was in the heart of the pandemic more so than now. But
Was it available day and date for like $30 on Disney?
yes, and it had that as well.
Okay, because Encanto is not. It's only in the theaters, I think.
Right, for a month or so, and then it's going to be on Disney Plus. And I think
I think Encanto will benefit from the Thanksgiving weekend as well. I think the people who don't take their family to see Ghostbusters, which if they have a bigger family that's got like young teens in it or teenagers, they're probably leaning to that. But any family that's predominantly younger children is probably going to go to Encanto. So they're pretty much going to split the family market over this next week, and it's just hard to tell which one will come out on top. I lean towards Ghostbusters because people who don't have families are still probably going to go see that, whereas not a lot of adults are going to go see Encanto right away.
yeah, Yeah, Encanto does skew much younger than Ghostbusters, and this is traditionally a great time for Disney to release their animated pictures. This is around the same time as the Frozen movies, Moana, Wreck-It Ralph, etc. This is like what they've typically staked out. But with this property, I'm not sure if it has the same broad appeal as those other ones. And if this thing does less than $20 million, that might be a bit of a disaster, a pretty significant disappointment, I think, for Disney. And Resident Evil is interesting that they're rebooting a franchise that was arguably ran into the ground earlier. They kind of tap out as much as they could with those first, I believe it was 6 movies. Here I'm adding a link to the Resident Evil page here with all those movies.
Is Raccoon City day and date on like Paramount or anything? I feel like I remember seeing that it was also going to be available somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good question. I just assumed it was exclusive because that's been Sony's bag lately. They've been
Oh yeah, it's Sony. Never mind. For some reason, I thought it was some. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing it up. I don't think that's going to do well, though. I don't think anyone cares about Resident Evil.
There's one movie we all are missing out. I guess the Licorice Pizza is releasing next week as well.
Oh, right. And is that going to be wide or pseudo wide
What
or
movie? Sorry, I missed that
that's
part.
Um, so Licorice Pizza.
Oh yeah, that's not opening wide. That's going to open in like 100 theaters or less. Probably like 3 theaters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually the release date for wide release isn't until like Christmas time. They're gonna like roll it out, from what I understand. So that's really common with Paul Thomas Anderson's work and kind of that prestige cinema that's shooting for the Oscars. French Dispatch just did it. They opened in like 3 theaters and then 40 and then 100 and now they're at like 1,000. So I don't think that that's going to be wide for another few weeks.
right. And they don't want to make the mistake that a lot of other ones have made, like The Eyes of Tammy Faye or even arguably Spencer and Belfast, where they go almost wide or wide and then just fizzle quickly in theaters. They want to maintain that momentum throughout the holiday
Yeah.
season and try to build an audience in the old-fashioned way, I guess.
You can
I think
pretty
a lot of
much bank on Licorice Pizza having the best per theater average, though, because those
right.
movies that play at like 2 theaters, they usually average out at like 10,000 a theater because in New York and LA tickets are going to be like $30 and then every seat's going to be filled. So it'll probably have the best per theater average if I had to guess.
Right, just like this weekend with that Joaquin Phoenix picture, Come On, Come On, did 134,000 at 5 theaters for a per theater average of just under $27,000. That's the highest of the weekend.
That's what we're
Ghostbusters
looking at.
Afterlife
We're
was.
looking at something in that range for Licorice Pizza. I'm very excited for it though.
Yes, it's been getting a lot of buzz. Yes, and Ghostbusters Afterlife did 10,000 per theater, but it was on 4,300 theaters. If you put Come On, or Licorice Pizza on 4,300 theaters, they would not be doing 10,000 per theater. They might be doing like $500 per theater if they're lucky. So
Yeah, agreed.
it's a bit of a perception game they play to try to build that momentum. They cherry pick the theaters that will provide them the highest per theater average, so they can brag about it when the box office numbers come in. But ultimately, it does not necessarily mean the movie is popular or or going anywhere per se. I mean, look at the French Dispatch. That's kind of wasn't it's not exactly peak Wes Anderson, shall we say. It's at standing over $13.3 million so far and falling pretty quickly here. It's was under $1 million this weekend. It was down 45%.
Yeah, to Encanto again. I didn't get this off before, but it feels to me like they also haven't marketed it that well. I think if you look at the trailer and everything, it seems just like something that would have an audience. It's got a lot of similar vibes to a lot of stuff that they have had success with, but I didn't really see a lot of trailers for it, and like it just seems like they didn't push it as hard as they have pushed many other things that they've maybe viewed as like a tentpole project.
So, sorry,
Partially
what
is
was the movie again? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Encanto.
Oh yeah. The Disney program. I don't think it will do really well, to be honest. I think people are
Yeah,
more waiting for Spider-Man, which is nearly about, was it just under 30 days? I think 20, 24, 25 days. And I know that they will have a third trailer, but because the trailer windows are quite, they have to have like 3 trailers and then TV spots, but now they're doing TV spots at the moment. So I think that with Ghostbuster Afterlife, they might have a long run before the next big movie comes out, which is Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's tough because I mean, yeah, Spider-Man is going to be huge. It's going to be very, very huge. But like, there's not a lot of crossover appeal within Kanto and Spider-Man, and Kanto is really the only thing left this year that is really specifically for children. So it's really hard to predict. I don't think they marketed it that well.
Right, and also the movie itself may just not be that appealing. Sometimes you can only do so much with marketing, and I believe the premise is it's a house, and each tenant or family member has their own superpower, except for the main girl who doesn't, and she has to find her superpower. It's been a while since I've seen the trailer, but is that the gist of it?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, do you feel that Ghostbusters will have another sequel going forward, but would that be with the same director or somebody different?
I have no idea. I guess I would have to watch it to see. I think that watching it would make that really clear.
They definitely want some kind of extension, whether it is another movie or a TV series. That's up in the air.
It doesn't seem as though the box office is going to support a direct sequel in the cinema, but Ghost Corps is committed to forwarding the intellectual property in whatever medium will take it. It also recognized that the real Ghostbusters is what inspired the longevity of the IP. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some kind of offshoot series, some kind of CW type drama emerge in the next couple of years if they can't justify a film.
How much do they need to get in the box office? Like, I know that they have to recuperate their costings. I think it's like double, including the marketing. How much do they need to get back? I can't remember how much they put forward for the movie, for the production. I think, was it 200 mil? I'm not too sure. Do you guys know?
Let's see. Looking it up, Sony's been pretty good about their costs, so I would be surprised if it was one of these. I would be surprised if it's budgeted like one of these Uber blockbusters. I mean, the number I've been seeing around is a production budget of 75 million, which would be pretty darn good considering the level of effects, considering it's a franchise movie, considering that most of these other movies are like 150, 200. But that's just for the production alone, and I don't know if that includes all the extra costs from the delays and what the marketing spend was. But it doesn't have as much to overcome as, say, Eternals does.
It's also
I
not
think
an exact science either. That goalpost is going to change based on a lot of things. Like, I don't know. There are just a lot of factors. If you look at a movie like Alita, for instance, Alita, made its money back. But if you look at the expectations they had for it, and then also the fact that they planned on releasing all these Avatar movies, and James Cameron really would have wanted to be involved, it's like, their expectations were bigger, even though they kind of accomplished what was vital for them to do a sequel. And then you have the Dune movie that just came out, and they greenlit a sequel, even though, at least here in the States, it didn't really perform that well. They really relied on international. And so the goalpost is going to move based on a lot of things. And also, you have to factor in the pandemic, right? People are making these decisions based on assuming that there will be naturally more success in 2 years when the pandemic is in a different place. So you're making decisions without really knowing what the global situation will be.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've also, I'm checking it right now that they've got 60 million. I think is it the first week? I'm not too sure, but so I'm assuming that they will, um if they do get, if they make their money back, I think there's a possibility that Sony will, finance another sequel, or whatever production would like to go forward with them, because it looks like it's going to be a positive, to be honest.
A
Yeah,
lot of that's going to depend on McKenna Grace too, because she carried this film.
I totally agree
The
with you.
global,
She did. She's amazing.
yeah, a lot of the initial publicity was on Finn Wolfhard, who, and honestly, without spoiling it, he's really less of an important character unless they give him something more to do. I didn't really, he wasn't as charismatic or as interesting as he is in Stranger Things. And I think as he gets older, I think that his star is going to not shine as bright, but McKenna Grace is going to have to carry the sequel if it goes back to theaters, because that's the I think the majority of people who went to see it this weekend, nerds like me aside, are going to go see it again because of that performance. It wasn't a precocious kid actor; it was a very well presented, nuanced performance. And if you see her on the talk shows today, she looks nothing like she did when she shot the film 2 years ago. So that's going to be an interesting variable there. When your lead actor ages out of a role or is isn't able to recapture that magic that led to their success, their studio is going to have to make a decision.
yeah. I think when it comes to things like that too, it's all about writing. Like you can really work with people aging if you have competent writers who are capable of pivoting.
I got
That's
the
very true.
impression.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I got the impression with Finn Wolfhard that because he's a teen heartthrob, that's why he was put forward for Afterlife. That's the impression that I got from it. I would have expected one of the other actors from Stranger Things to be in it. I can't remember the guy with the curly hair. I don't know. I can't remember. I would have expected him to be in this movie. But yeah, he was very under. I do believe that Finn Wolfhard was underutilized in this movie. I have to totally agree with you.
Yeah, I think that there's evidence from what I saw on screen that there was a subplot or elements of the film that were cut just to keep it just a hair over 2 hours, and perhaps 2 hours is a little much for the target audience that they went for. But um, the thing about this film is that the writing isn't necessarily its strength. As they shifted focus from it being a comedy first, supported by drama, this is a drama first, supported by comedic moments, and it's very easy to pick apart the plot based on that. There are questions that if it were primarily a comedy, you wouldn't ask the question, but since they presented it as a family drama, certain choices kind of weaken that structure a bit. So if Jason and I think Gil are the writers for the next one, they're gonna have to step their game up a little bit, especially if McKenna Grace is.
You can really
I,
count on doing well in home media as well. I mean, look at the target audience for Ghostbusters as a franchise. You're going to have a lot of like collectionists out there that will buy, the steel book so they can get the special features. They're going to want to have it because they own the other Ghostbusters movies, even if they didn't like absolutely love it. It's got that nostalgia factor. So a lot of people will buy it so that it can go with the rest of their Ghostbusters movies, and it'll do really well on video on demand as well too. So it's really hard to factor in those things.
I was also that I've noticed with a lot of movies lately that there is a lot of issues with their writing with pacing. I'm so used to the 80s being quite quick pace and getting straight to plots and plot devices, but I know that with the drama you have to set the scene and yep, the exposition and everything, but I felt that there was a bit of pacing issue. Um, and then it kind of rushed a little bit at the end. That's my personal opinion on that.
Yeah, and there are other things I think in trying to assemble a working cut of this film that they were trying to strike that balance between nostalgia and telling a story for a new audience, and it knew it had to win both in order to keep moving forward. Uh, I will say that the hardest hit I was as a Ghostbusters fan, as a moviegoer who likes the overall story of the Ghostbusters mythology. Ray Stantz utters a single line on the phone in this movie that it was a gut punch and took me completely out of the film, and it felt so disingenuous that I had to actively manually resuspend my disbelief in order to get through the rest of it.
I heard that part. I heard that part. That was it. Was it? I was shocked by that as well. He said one thing that which was a bit confusing for me. He did that took me.
And the subsequent exposition dump was a bit tired, and it doesn't undergo scrutiny without falling apart. But the fact that Jason and Gil were trying to write the story for it was mainly a Goonies story. It was the kids go to this place and they discover a secret and go on an adventure, which was awesome. I wish that adventure had been a little bit more, for lack of a better word, enchanting. But it was enough to carry me through, and I thought, yeah, I would watch another movie with these kids in it. That would be great. Podcast was amazing, and I don't think Logan Kim has been in another film before this, and he really helped propel this plot. And his relationship with Phoebe was really well rendered and acted.
I think the kids reminded me of the original Ghostbusters, especially with, I don't want to give any spoilers, but you can see some of the personalities as well as Paul Rudd as well. That reminded me of, can't say too much. So
Yeah, he was an interesting mix of Louis Tully and Peter Venkman, but none of these characters are clones, which is an achievement. I know that Ghostbusters Answer the Call, or AKA 2016, tried to ape. Well, let's create this comic chorus of voices, but it totally failed to create individual voices that created that chorus that worked so well in the original Ghostbusters, where you knew the head, the heart, the hands, and the mouth of the Ghostbusters would go through each scene and riff off of each other. 2016, not so much. It was a lot of different voices that didn't necessarily merge. I think they recreated a group of kids who could riff off of each other in different ways without reestablishing that familiar Ghostbusters team group.
yeah, definitely. I also, kind of to touch on it, I think I have to say that the special effects, the CGI on here is incredible. No, it is amazing. I have to.
I agree, and I was really pleased because those early trailers were kind of vague, and I know the effects weren't done yet, but I think Muncher was a great character. I'm kind of slimered out. I still refer to him as Onion Head, which is what he was in the original film, but Muncher was a good introduction for this new cast to that world and very consistent with the original comic.
Yeah, I also, I have to say that can I say the end credit? Am I allowed to? Can't not talk about the spoiler, but is that okay? I,
I
I, I, I
we
won't say the spoiler. I'll just say that I think the new version of Gozer, especially, is very eerie, and I love that they've got the technology to do that. And yeah, there was some moments where I was literally scared.
Nice. Well, we can get there eventually. I just want to make sure that everyone is okay with spoilers before we go there. I know Jesse hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
care about spoilers.
oh, okay. Well then, yeah. Okay, either that they if they don't care, that's also fine too. Hey, Connor, did you get to see Ghostbusters yet?
Even though, excuse me, unfortunately I haven't. Annoyingly, another one of those things which is really busy weekends at the cinema again. So that's been a bit of a pain. But I was just joining the room quick just to ask, was it good? Do I need to see the first one before I see this one, or because I haven't seen the?
You need to see the first one at least.
Yeah, I think you should see the first one. There's going to be some tropes in the movie that you'll probably think, "Oh yeah, I remember it from the first movie." But the second one, I don't think they reference anything to it. There's no reference.
So was it a good?
I
Yeah,
give it a 8 out of 10. A 8 out of 10.
and I respectfully disagree with my peers on the panel here. The film was designed to target new audiences, not necessarily just new ones, but it may want to. It may get you to go back and watch the first two, but certainly you won't lose anything. It will lose a lot of emotional impact, but I think a lot of that emotional impact is on people like me who were there at the beginning. So if you've never seen it, I don't know if it will ever have the same emotional impact at the end that it had for us. So it's either or. It's the Easter eggs are, oh, that's a really cool thing they did there, but none of the Easter eggs propel the plot. So I don't know if that matters
Right.
to you, but
Because I thought the cast looked really good. I liked the actors they got together for it, and I like the idea that the son Jason's directing it, so that's a nice touch to it. So I just thought, and the cinematography looks really good, so that's what was interesting me.
Yeah, but like I said, you do need to see the first movie just to appreciate it fully. Yeah, the Easter eggs, as Jay says, they don't forward the plot, and some of them was a little distracting to me, as also being an OG Ghostbusters fan. I guess part of me also would like to see uh, someone's reaction who has never seen any Ghostbuster movie. So you could also do that, Connor. To come to think of it, what would be the reaction of someone who has never seen it? A Ghostbusters picture, especially when we have all those nods to the original. Anyway, so if you want to be a guinea pig there, Connor, we can
Yeah,
talk
this
about.
is all kind of new territory for me. Even though I was born in the 90s, I didn't like the Ghostbusters thing passed by. It was kind of what got me into film as I grew up was kind of like Matrix, Jaws, Jurassic Park, E.T., and Star Wars. I did that lot when I was younger, and that's what got me as a film fan. Well, I'm talking to you about today, but it was just Ghostbusters that for some reason, just didn't go into.
Well, that makes sense. It was very much an 80s thing. And if you above the pinned link is the top movies of 1984, those are what they earned in the calendar year of 1984. And Ghostbusters was the number one movie for the calendar year. So they give you a frame of reference and the mindset we're coming from. Part of that is also because the sequel, Ghostbusters 2, fizzled a bit at the box office. I mean, it broke the opening weekend record, but then ended up making less than half of what the first picture did. For Hollywood at large, Ghostbusters seemed to be kaput after that second picture, even though it was still a very popular movie. I mean, tons of people saw it. Nonetheless, the makers of Afterlife didn't have that much respect for it. They'd barely reference it. I mean, Jay, Emma, seriously, there were zero references to Ghostbusters 2. Is that correct?
no, they Raise a Cult was introduced in Ghostbusters 2. I will say that they did cherry pick a few things, but I think they made a creative decision because this was going to be about Gozer, and that they were going to use Elmer Bernstein's theme to kind of just not show any extra light onto Ghostbusters 2 and Vigo.
I got from the second movie, they did reference that they were going out of business. So they did say something about that. It was plausible for that time. I think it was like 3 or 4 years before the first movie to describe what happened. Why things have changed over the past. So yeah, they did say that they kind of wasn't getting much calls on any kind of ghost hunting or.
Yeah, Jason Reitman confirmed in an interview that Ghostbusters 2 is still canon, and the events that Ray described were after GB2. So he said that they may focus on events of GB2 in a possible sequel.
Sounds like it might. This film's off to a good start though, because I saw good reviews, and actually, one of the reasons I didn't get to see it was actually really busy, like all of Saturday and all of today. So there you.
Well, it nonetheless was number one in the UK, did $5.8 million there. Overall, as Emma referenced earlier, it did $16 million overseas and is tracking ahead of Free Guy and Jungle Cruise and Cruella. So it had a pretty good start overseas. The global opening was 60 million. That's the 44 here plus the 16 overseas. And so off to a decent start there. But the number one movie overseas, though, was Eternals, which did nearly 23 million and has reached 200 million worldwide. And now, 200 million internationally, and worldwide now sits at $336 million. And then just to wrap up the international portion of this broadcast, No Time to Die now is the number one movie from Hollywood worldwide. It inched past F9 to attain that title. It's got about 580 million internationally and another 155 here for a total of $734 million. So that's what's going on internationally.
That's incredible.
What you're talking about, Brandon, is a really interesting phenomenon because what worked for Ghostbusters in 1984 worked against it in 89. Because in 84, we had a lot of amazing movies coming out, and Ghostbusters rose to nearly the top of that. I think Beverly Hills Cop was one that competed with it. In 89, Ghostbusters 2 went up against Batman, and it went up against another Indiana Jones sequel and a Honey I Shrunk the Kids movie. So it had the sequel had some major competition that it didn't rise above. So that had a major influence on in a few weeks what its potential box office revenue.
Yes, I mean, those big pictures sucked the air out of the room, you could say, but it was quite the time there because we had Ghostbusters, bang, opening weekend record, and then Batman blows them all out of the water. So that is a good point about what was going on there in the summer of '89. However, that original Ghostbusters opened on the same weekend as Gremlins. So there is room for more than one movie to do well. And as you mentioned too, Jay, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was percolating underneath those big guns in '89 and became a massive success itself. But if you go to the link above, I believe the date, no, they don't link the date anymore. But okay. If you go to the link above, though, it does say, yeah, you see Gremlins June 8, Ghostbusters June 8. They opened on the same day, both Ghostbusters and Gremlins, two of the greatest classics from the 80s, on one weekend. What a double feature that was. But Connor, yes, I do recommend seeing Ghostbusters Afterlife. I think everybody on the panel who has seen it recommends it. It's just the question is for you is do you want to see the first movie to get the most out of it, or do you want to go in cold with no reference points? And I would be curious if anyone did see it cold to see your reaction because a lot of that third act is dependent on your appreciation for the OG Ghostbusters.
Brandon, can I ask a quick question as someone who's not seen like the Ghostbusters films?
Has anyone, you're asking, has anyone on this panel not seen them?
No, I just wanted to ask that. Do you think they should keep going? Well, obviously, giving spoilers away because I've not seen it. Do you think they should keep going with it now, or do you think they've kind of done a really good job of like wrapping it all up and it now feels like it's done its thing? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
You might be asking the wrong guy because I thought they kind of wrapped it up with the first movie, but the second movie was okay as well. I would only if they have a really good story to tell. I mean, they have the opening, the doors open if they have more to say, and that's where I stand on it. What about you guys?
There's two end credits. Oh, hello.
Oh,
Hi.
hey, Deontay.
Is that I'm aware that there's two end credits, so there it is leading on to some sort of the big thing now is the cinematic universe. A lot of films or movies at the moment are kind of doing that, trying to get properties to kind of have a long-winded story, like because they are competing with streaming services like Netflix and Amazon. So I think that's what they're trying to push forward with Ghostbusters because there's so much story to tell, especially with a character now, bringing them back to business.
And in 2016, Reitman and Aykroyd formed Ghost Corps, which is now owned by Sony, and their whole thing is to create a franchise of new films and properties, video games and whatnot. Um, when I interviewed Aykroyd a few years back, we talked briefly about a TV show because I was more interested in an episode, more of a serialized development of characters over multiple episodes rather than 90 minutes every couple of years. And his answer was more about whatever we can sell that would advance the franchise they will consider. So yeah, I mean, if it was viable, yeah, they would turn that back into a cartoon and probably will, and probably into a TV show because it makes money.
So I definitely so I saw the film. I liked it a lot. But I'll wait to get more into that later. But as far as the future of the franchise, I like a combination of both. I definitely would like to see a TV show, um, maybe on, I don't know what streaming platform, but I definitely like to see a TV show. But also, I think part of the power of Ghostbusters is really just seeing it in the theaters. I feel like it's something about seeing it there. So I'm hoping that they can make a sequel. I saw both of the cut scenes, and like I said, I enjoyed it. And as an actor, I would love to be cast as Ernie Hudson's nephew in the future. I'm just going to throw that out there. If anyone is listening to that, I have a great idea for it. But anyway, yeah, I'd love to do that. But anyway, I like the film, and I really hope that they can continue that as far as like with a. Ideally, I'd like to have a movie franchise with those characters, but then also the TV show maybe have somebody from the movie but new characters, and then they kind of link together in the movies. But anyway,
Yeah, I hope they continue as well. Yeah, I hope they find something compelling to continue. Don't continue just for the sake of continuing, which was my fear with this picture and I guess the previous one. The continuation for the sake of continuation because they think they can wring more out of it commercially. But if they have more stories to tell, and with this cast of characters, yeah, I'm game. And yeah, if they bring in the nephew, yeah, bring on Deontay as Ernie's nephew. Sure, that sounds good to me. Cool.
man, I already have that. The story is it's a nephew who was scarred as a kid and is afraid of ghosts, and so he's trying to overcome that. And then Ernie's kind of taking him up. I feel like the story would be great.
Mm.
Um, I've got a question as well. I just wanted to know why Ghostbusters 2 was a failure in comparison to the original Ghostbusters.
Ooh,
Girl,
that's a
I love your British accent. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think part of it's the pacing. Whenever I think of Ghostbusters 2, man, it didn't have as much humor. Um, like I said, I think the story pacing was definitely different. And I don't think part of why people love Ghostbusters, if you think about it, is the nostalgia merchandise, right? You think about Ghostbusters, you think about Slimer, right? And you think about Pillsbury Doughboy. What did Ghostbusters 2 have? You can't really go back to something where it's like, oh, you had this thing or that thing. You just kind of have a random old guy in a picture. But in the first Ghostbusters, there's so many different memes and different things you could go back to. So I think that's another reason why.
One thing that I noticed in Ghostbusters 2 that they kind of went on this whole mood slime. I don't know. I like the element of Vigo in the second, but the mood slime where they were singing at the end, I know it was a bit of a Christmas spirit, but yeah, the humor, the comedy started to kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
And I think and the scares weren't there as the original because like the very first scene of Ghostbusters, you know what the movie is going to be about because they were in the library and they saw a ghost and she was terrifying the library.
Yeah, I think that they Ghostbusters 2 was kind of a reset. There were a lot of influences because the audience for the real Ghostbusters cartoon were much younger and they knew that that's what was going to end up in the seats. And but I will say that the strongest argument I've had for the strengths of Ghostbusters 2 is that they upped the stakes and the scares over the comedy, where you had a literal baby in the middle of this conflict, and that there were forces trying to literally kill this baby at many points where you didn't have that in the original. That said, I think that was Ramis and Aykroyd's response to them dumbing down and softening up many of the elements that made the original 84 film work. And the comparison that I make is there was 5 years between the first Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. Imagine the difference between the work that the Beatles were doing in 64 and the work that they were doing in 69. It was a completely different world, a completely different taste for the audience. And so they had to conform. but they were also told that they couldn't introduce character arcs to a degree. So if you think about Ghostbusters as a Marx Brothers movie, think about the Marx Brothers movies that you've seen. Uh, Chico, Harpo, Groucho, and Zeppo are the same characters in different situations. And that's how Ramis and Aykroyd applied that to Ghostbusters 2. How can we make this movie with our Marx Brothers? And they did that by resetting Venkman and Dana to not being a thing so we could watch that whole thing over again. And then have them come back from being stripped of everything they achieved in the first movie to only to have to rebuild it a second time. So I think that was probably part of the problem with Ghostbusters 2 because audiences came back saying, well, what's the next awesome thing that they do? Only to have to watch them rebuild themselves from 5 years ago. And the comedy wasn't as sharp or as counterculture as it was 5 years earlier. That whole Second City, National Lampoon, SNL vibe was gone, and they were really aping a cartoon to a degree, to the point that Louis Tully was chasing Slimer around town with a proton pack. So there were a lot of things with Ghostbusters 2 that were problematic, but I think this film course corrected that, and I think maybe to Brandon's point earlier, that's probably why they didn't reference it so often because they knew that 2 was campier than the first, and they just wanted to draw back to that initial vibe. Maybe I'm wrong.
You raise a good point there, Jay, about them resetting the storyline because Ghostbusters 2 is often criticized as being effectively Ghostbusters all over again, just imitating a lot of the beats of that first picture. And that 1984 movie was lightning in a bottle. And even, especially at that time, it was tremendously difficult to mount a successful sequel. I mean, especially in the comedy genre. So people were anticipating Ghostbusters 2. That's why it did break the opening weekend record. But to have that lasting appeal over the season, it needed to be something better, something more, something different. It's always, like I said, there's many franchises that have fallen with the second movie, but when you're just repeating the same gag effectively, at least to the normie who's not obsessing on it, they lose interest quickly. And that's effectively what happened with Ghostbusters 2. And that may mean it's unfairly maligned. It probably is. I mean, I remember liking it. I remember seeing it multiple times and preferring it to Batman back in the day. It's just difficult to recreate something that became a phenomenon. And the first Ghostbusters was a phenomenon. And it's not the only franchise to falter. I mean, look at what happened to Gremlins. I mean, Gremlins 2 and a year later made a fraction of the first Gremlins. At least Ghostbusters 2 did, roughly or nearly half the business of the first movie. It's just the way it goes. I mean, you can't. This is why I'm always trying to temper expectations. You can't expect every entry in a franchise to do gangbusters, and that was the case to a large degree with Ghostbusters 2. Heck, that same year, Back to the Future Part 2 had the same problem. That also lost nearly half its audience, and so it's not like Ghostbusters 2 is the only problematic entry in a franchise here. But yeah, you're definitely on point, Jay, about that. And I remember them trying to acknowledge that cartoon, which was a weird thing. That cartoon. I mean, Egon was blonde in it. I mean, I couldn't get into it because Egon was.
It
I,
really
they started
sounded
to
like
be
Fred from
caricatures.
Scooby.
I was saying that they started to adopt a lot of the caricatures of the cartoon, which with Janine's hair and the glasses, it was completely different from what she was in the beginning, like the first.
Yeah, a lot of that was likeness rights, but I will say that a lot of those episodes, as written by J. Michael Straczynski, who went on to do Babylon 5, they are really well written. But yeah, that was kind of a distraction, and but the fact remains, Ghostbusters 2 probably would not have seen the light of day because without the real Ghostbusters being as successful as it was. Murray wasn't going to sign back on unless he had certain how you say promises made on the back end based on the fact that they were going to water down the script to make it an adaptation of a cartoon. So I'm just glad it was.
Can we also talk about the very underrated Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters 3, aka the video game? I don't know if y'all know about that, but the plot of that was really good. I enjoyed that video game a lot. And it sucks that unfortunately, RIP. But man, that the story for that was really good. And
I've seen some clips from the game story mode. It is really good.
Agreed. And for the longest time, Ramis and Aykroyd said that this was the official Ghostbusters 3, because it incorporated Gozerian mythology that was supposed to be canon, that this film pretty much writes over. So I'm not sure what the status of that is, but I agree with you. It was a great ride when I watched it through the 3 hour playthrough a few, I guess, years ago.
Has anyone seen the Extreme Ghostbusters? The cartoon that came a little bit later.
I have
It's good. I think it was creepier than the real Ghostbusters. It definitely had a different vibe, but um, like Ghostbusters 2016, it's part of the family, and I won't shit on its head, but I will say it's not exactly as good as its predecessor. But some,
I take it back. Actually, after re-looking at it, I feel like as a kid, I'd seen maybe commercials of it, but I never invested.
yeah,
I wanted to ask everybody why did it take so long to get to Afterlife? I know that there was some stories that was circling around. I know that Bill Murray was a bit hesitant to join, get back on board, and also there was that tension that he had with Harold Ramis. Um, why why did he change his mind? I know maybe because of the sentimental value, with Harrod, sorry, passing on.
So I feel like this is how it's gonna go. I feel like I have a theory, and I feel like Weird Beard the Gray has the answer. So I'll give my theory first, and then Weird Beard's gonna like probably clear everything up. I feel like it was just because they wanted to have a good story. Like, yeah, there was the fight in between, them in the real world, which I think they kind of added some elements of that to the script, which I thought was cool. But yeah, I think they really wanted to just do it right and have a good script, like what we saw with the Ghostbusters 2016 movie, which I haven't seen yet. I probably will one day, but I haven't seen it. I feel like after seeing that, they're just like, all right, whatever we do next, we really gotta release this. And everyone wanted to have, at least I feel, a Ghostbusters movie and project with some of the original cast, right? So in my opinion, I think what took so long was just having a really good script and having the right tone and everything.
I appreciate the faith you have in me, Deontay. It's I think what happened with Murray was he did not want to be part of any sequels at first, and then they promised him a significant amount of the back end for Ghostbusters 2, and he came back and he cleaned up. For 2016, he was convinced that this was going to be a passing of the torch, and he has great respect for Kate McKinnon, Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, and Leslie Jones, and he had faith in the script. It was also an assurance that he would be killed on screen, which he was, and then he would never have to be involved with the franchise again. My understanding is that for this film, there was that issue with his disconnect with Harold Ramis, who was a great partner of his, going back to Groundhog Day and Stripes. They were great friends, and despite his conduct on publicity interviews, there was a great love between those two men. So I think that script, if you see the film, there's a moment of atonement that is, I think, was instrumental in him approving the script and coming back for whatever capacity he was in. Spoilers alert. Um, but yeah, he agreed. I think he's always at heart loved Ghostbusters for what it did for his career. After all, he wouldn't have been able to make his vanity project, The Razor's Edge, without participating in Ghostbusters. But it also set him on his career course. So he's always been open to coming back to Ghostbusters with the right script, so it didn't embarrass him or anybody else involved. But based on what I saw on Thursday afternoon, I completely understand why he came back to the role of Peter Venkman, and I look forward to going back.
And real quick, didn't he also? I don't know if it was a joke. I took it as serious for a while, but didn't he say he wouldn't come back unless he died in the script? Is that
Yes, yes, it was. That's an often repeated quote. It was in Starlog magazine, where it just was picked up, and he was true about that. He said, "Yeah, I want to be a ghost in the next Ghostbusters." And then when he fell out with Reitman for a while, he said that, "Yeah, I would only come back if I were dead." And those two different statements were kind of bounced around. But
so? What was everyone's? I know I was kind of late, so my apologies. But how did everyone feel about the film? I'm sure you said it 1,000 times, but can I get a quick?
I like the film a lot, but there is a few things that I just nitpicks, but everything was good. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Oh yeah, thumbs up.
it's
What
my
about you?
new favorite boutique gift.
Okay.
And Sid liked it as well. I think he lost connection or something, but he liked it as well.
I definitely want to buy the outfit though for next Halloween.
The uniform or
Yeah, the uniform. I think I'll definitely choose Spengler.
Yeah, I thought the film was good. I enjoyed it. Just one thing I've noticed about movies this year, especially Dune is a great example, and this is kind of a good example. It just feels like they're stretching out stories that don't have to be as stretched out. Like for Dune, it just felt like how that movie went. You could have compressed that and still had something else for the third act. Or if you were going to do that, you should have fluffed it up more with more, different subplots and different concurrent stories going on. And I felt like with this one, it kind of was just like, I liked it a lot, but it was just, you could have fluffed it up more or compressed it and added something else. Because Finn is cool, but it was just kind of like, all right, what's your point? Like, you just to start the car and drive? Because if not, I feel like you could have just had the mom do that. Um, and I get why you had, the mom do that. It was nostalgic. I get it. One for one, basically everything. They were just copying Ghostbusters. Like, okay, we did this in Ghostbusters, and we'll do it exactly right here in Afterlife. And I was like, okay, I appreciate it, but from the trailers, I thought early on, I'm trying not to spoil it too much. I just thought we would have more involvement from certain characters. The trailers made it seem like Paul Rudd's character. I thought the first 1/3 or maybe 1/4 of the film we get introduced, boom, boom, boom. Then we get the squad. You know what I'm saying? Like it took almost a full movie, or not even full movie. It took a little over half until they got their first ghost. I thought it was gonna be a little bit more, um, faster than that. What else? I'm trying to think. But yeah, I just really thought Finn's character was gonna have more relevance. I thought his crush was gonna have more relevance. Both of them was just kind of there. So now we're relying on a sequel to really flesh out those characters. But then the sad thing about that is once you start trying to do that in the sequel, that leaves little room for the overall story arc because now you got to focus too much on character work, which you could have did in the first one. Anyway, yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it, but there are a lot of things I was like, you could have just compressed this or add more relevance to the characters because some people are just there just to do it. And I don't know if you guys remember too. Well, Brandon, since it's just us kind of and Macy. Could we talk about spoilers? Is that cool?
Sure, but we'll give fair warning. But first, I did want to address your point because you did make a good point about how they are drawing things out. Dune, just draw it out so we can get another movie, and maybe this picture to some degree, like with maybe cutting scenes with Finn Wolfhard, or just the pacing, and by the time we get to the team up, or on the other side, people were complaining about Eternals because It was so rushed, so much was crammed in. Uh, you know, some were saying, well, Denis Villeneuve was smart, was saying, you only giving me 2.5 hours. Well, I'm going to only make half a movie. And Chloe Zhao should have said the same when it came to Eternals, because I need 5 hours for this movie. But see, she still tried to cram 5 hours worth of material in just 2.5 hours. So it's funny how we're getting these two types of criticisms of pictures that are drawn out like Dune and Ghostbusters Afterlife, or not drawn out enough or too rushed like Eternals, and we're trying to having a hard time finding a movie that is paced just right.
I wanted to say that the pacing is an issue, and there's far too many characters in the movie, and I think that's why the movie was a little bit longer than it should. I think that I can name three people that could have been removed from the. Three characters could be removed from the movie, and I think it wouldn't. I think it would make the movie a little bit more flow more better, and we'll get into more like the arcs of different plots much quicker, and it will seem more smooth and seamless.
Yeah, for instance, I didn't think there was enough reaction of the town to the ghosts coming out. I mean, that was all rushed, that part. And basically, what you see in the trailer is what's in the movie. There's not much more in the movie beyond what you see in the trailer in regards to the ghosts spooking up the town. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there were two. I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to go there because that element has already been done in Goosebumps. Those last two Goosebumps movies were basically ghosts on the loose in a town. Maybe they're trying to avoid comparison to that. I don't know, but again, if you guys are open to spoilers, we can definitely talk spoilers now, since everyone on the stage has seen the picture. So, fair warning to anyone not on the stage. We are going into spoiler in 1, 2, 3. Spoiler mode.
All right, this is what I really wanted to. I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but I saw it, and it was a missed opportunity for character growth right here. In the diner part, oh, Sid, just to let you know we're talking spoilers. Has Sid seen it? He said yes, right? Okay, cool. I just try to be fair. Um, in the diner when they were going over the plans and like, oh yeah, this this is so old and blah blah blah. Oh yeah, we got to go here. If you look behind, I don't know her name. I apologize, but Finn's crush. If you look behind her, you saw the people, the guys that she hung out with. They were looking behind and they were just kind of listening in on them. I don't know if anyone else. I caught that, I just kept waiting for them to say, "So you're really just hanging out with these guys?" I was waiting on that, but that never happened, and that was a good opportunity for character growth to show, like, "Hey, well, I've been with these guys, and maybe they're right." Something like that to really show, like, okay, we see her start from this. I don't know why she's just mean to people, but she's kind of just mean to new workers, giving them a hard time. We see her start from that, and then we could have seen her like really. You get a chance to open up, and you get a chance to see that character open up more. But we didn't get that, and all we get was them talking about the plan, and then the people she hung out with who thought those people were nerds and losers. They didn't say anything, and they just looked over. I was like, dang, missed opportunity.
That's a
That
great
was
observation.
Yeah, it was in this. Sorry, there was a nostalgia to the prison scene when Egon did the same thing, and we got to see everyone's reaction. And all I saw was just the shoulders, and that was
Yeah, and in both the originals, there were that moments where they were incarcerated and explaining the plot, and the second one with Brian Doyle Murray as the warden of the insane asylum. Yeah, I fully expected somebody to stand up, and I was kind of hoping it was Trevor too, because it was really kind of just a really a more of a true to life teenager than a movie teenager. It was kind of annoying for him to just endorse what his little sister was trying to say. Would have been rewarding. But yeah, if Lucky would have done that, that would have been.
Welcome to the stage, nerds. Just a fair warning, nerds. And correct me if you want to be called something else, but we are talking spoilers right now.
Oh, sorry. That's cool. Thanks. Thanks. I came in here to talk about this movie, so I was in.
Cool. Deontay, were you going to say something? I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh no, you cool, bro. What else? I thought also just man, it felt like a big. It felt like they were trying to make it a big movie, but it felt uh very too small. Like for example, the first Thor movie. There's certain movies where you could just tell like it's supposed to be larger than what it is, but like the set feels small and everything feels small. For this movie, it's like a world disaster thing, but I just didn't feel the effects of just like what I'm saying, like this is gonna destroy the earth. There's just too many missed opportunities. I felt like I said, I really did enjoy the movie, but one part that was really making me mad that I guess I call you Gray, that Gray said was just the fact that in the prison scene, just like you see your town get destroyed by something, and it's not a gun, and you're a sheriff, and you're telling me you're not gonna just question, all right, what the freak is this thing right there? You're just gonna let that happen and just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna put this like evil Dave Chappelle should have said something, all right, but he didn't. All he did was just put the all he did was just put the gun up and be like, oh yeah, this is some crazy stuff. We're just gonna. So he could have said, oh wow, this is a Ghostbusters thing. Like we definitely got. There was nothing to that. There was no call on it. All there was is he just accepted the fact that this is like this must be a gun or some type of weapon. And I was just like, so you're not gonna do anything with it. You're just gonna let that happen. Okay. I was getting mad and mad at the.
That's a great point. As one of the things I thought of as well, because the first two had that really human foil that they had to overcome to get to the bigger supernatural threat. It was, what is his name?
Bokeem.
Sheriff Lucky, Sheriff Lucky's dad. Oh, Domingo, Sheriff Domingo, Lucky's dad. He he was not a Walter Peck or a Hardemeyer at all. And I was just wondering what is he going to do? But yeah, you're right. It was just kind of, and he was absolutely right. He pulled them over. The kid was underage, didn't have a license. They had done property damage. Of course, you're going to put him in prison. My question is why they allowed podcast out without podcast parents showing up to sign.
Oh, that's good. I didn't even think. Hey, that's good.
And I also wondered why he got such high billing for just one scene. If you notice at the end credits, Bokeem Woodbine is like what fourth build or something like that. Something it's crazy high billing, and above the podcast and Lucky, and he just had one scene.
Because the name, man, the name reckons it. Like, come on, like I didn't really know who no one was, but after Bokeem, right? Let's be real. And he probably signed on. He's like, yeah, I'll do it, but you gotta have my name top five.
Or maybe there were more scenes that are on the cutting room floor. I think the craziest example of this is the movie Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. Andy Garcia shows up like at the very end for like a millisecond, and then he gets third billing on the movie.
Yeah, that's
I also have some issues with the movie as well with Ivo Shandor at the. I don't know why he was. I didn't know why he was present in the movie only to be ripped in half. That just blows my mind. And also, I always thought that Ray Stance would be in the situation where he would be secluded from his family than Egon. I don't know if anybody agreed because I felt that Ray was the eccentric one and then Egon was the more rational one because when he wasn't in the second movie, he went back to doing, working for a lab. I can't remember. I think he was doing some sort of testing and stuff, but Ray was more into, supernatural, the witchcraft and all of that stuff. I don't know if anyone agree with me, but I just felt that didn't feel like Egon a little bit. I thought that was more Ray.
oh, absolutely. I think that gets back to what we were talking about, Emma, earlier. We didn't like
Yeah.
that one
That's
line.
how I felt. It didn't feel like Egon, but they're saying
No,
he wasn't friends with them. It's like Egon was like I could just. He's the type of guy that wouldn't say too much unless you asked him something. That
right.
didn't feel like him.
And Brandon, I'm
Sorry.
sorry for making this into a Siskel and Ebert on Ghostbusters Afterlife and the larger program, but yeah, that is when Ray Stantz says Egon Spengler can burn in hell. I thought that Egon must have done something like set fire to an entire cruise ship to earn that, because Ray Stantz would never say that about his friend. And to the point, Egon's character is all about data. It's all about analysis. He would never go to Ray without firm data supporting his analysis. Ray, absolutely. I can
Agreed.
see Ray going to
Agreed.
Egon doing the exact same thing. And Egon going, I'm sorry, Ray, I don't see the data pointing in the direction that you see it. And Ray taking all of the tech out to the farmhouse. But
Right.
That's Ray. That's the characteristic of Ray being there. That's Ray's house. That's what I was thinking. But when they kept saying Egon, I was like, no, this is not Egon. He wouldn't have the whistle. That's not Egon. This is Ray. I don't know. The writers were getting confused with the characters.
Well,
It
I
did it did scream of a franchise that's being cobbled together and hampered by what happened in reality. I mean, the loss of Harold Ramis, all the conflicts between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, and all the everybody involved. So it did feel like they were trying to piece together something from the ashes, and this is the result of that. And then another question I had was, who did Harold Ramis or who did Egon make babies with? That was a little bit confusing. They don't mention who the
Sorry, the math
grandmother was.
doesn't. Sorry, I did the math, and I'm like, okay, 1984, and to have a full grown woman and a child that may be like 16 with, it didn't make sense. Like, how did Ray get a girlfriend and had children? That kind of boggled me. That's another one.
so
Right, and it wasn't Annie Potts. And then also the actress Carrie Coon, who plays the mother, and she's wonderful in this movie. But yeah, she did not read as 25 or 30, because based on the math here, the oldest she could have been was 30.
right. Man, that's a good question. I just want to back up. If I could go to the Egon part, I agree. I don't. That's definitely not his character. What I would have liked to have seen them do instead was, since Egon is all about numbers, I think he still could have went, because Egon was, once he believed in something, he did go full strength after it, right? So what they could have did was have it where it was still the whole number system. Like, okay, like this happened in 1805 or boom, 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 right there. And then he could have did the number system, but he could have just been a year off. And so they could have, that could have led to mass destruction and maybe some lives lost or something like that. And then that's how the Ghostbusters go out of business, because they believed in Egon, and usually he's right, but they went all in and he was wrong. And then so then after that, he still believed, like, no, 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 it's my numbers can't be wrong. And then maybe we find out that he was only wrong because it was upside down or something, like he read a manuscript upside down or something like that. But I definitely think I agree. The reason why they did that was because RIP in real life. But yeah, I do want to talk about Winston Duke after, or not Winston Duke. Ernie Hudson.
I just to go off on what you said, John. I thought that my idea for the screenplay is that Ray had a falling out with Murray and, sorry if I'm getting the characters mixed up, and Harold, Aegon and Peter, because I felt because Ray was more obsessed with things, because that's the characteristics that I got from him, and that he would be in that town, and that he was unaware that Egon had passed away. So I thought that would have been a little bit more interesting to go down.
I agree. I know the film makes a point of saying that Trevor is 15 years old and Callie is 12. So if I'm generous and I say that Callie is 35, Egon would have probably had a child somewhere between Ghostbusters 1 and 2 and 86. Otherwise, chicks dig his epididymis, as said in Ghostbusters 2. So it may have happened before Ghostbusters. I don't know. Um, but I think that it's interesting that he had a family, and I think it would have been probably more interesting to know who, he had gotten into a relationship with, because clearly it wasn't Janine, because Janine and Callie had a scene together. But this whole construction of Gozer becomes an issue because he abandoned his entire family. He was rejected by his friends, and yet everything we saw about the mountain, everything we saw about the mine in Somerville was so easily accessible by kids. Why didn't Egon call and say, "Hey, you didn't believe my data. Come see with your own eyes this giant statue of Gozer in the middle of a mine in Oklahoma"? That never happened. So that was one of the things that if it were a comedy first and a drama second, I would have overlooked. But as a drama first, I'm kind of, did you think?
Right, and the fact that they so easily found out that he the guy did the steel beams, which I understand why they did that tie-in like that, but I was just like, I felt they could have did something better. But if they could do all that so quickly, you're telling me that Egon couldn't communicate those things with them? It just didn't.
And why take Ecto if the introduction scene is him in a truck? He, Ecto is there, and the technology is there to draw the viewer into the scene and into the film. The fact that the technology was used to contain Gozer over so many years, I would have picked up the phone and called Ray and said, "Hey, come out and take a look at this." And Ray would have, because they've had 40 years of
He could have just taken a smartphone video and sent it to him because of the timing of this movie. I mean, it's present day.
Yeah, I agree. I also I would get rid of Finn and the girl that he fancied. I think they should have been removed out of the movie. Also, I wasn't feeling Callie Spengler as well. Sorry. I think if she was removed out of it, I think the story would have been picked up a little bit more quickly.
Agreed. I think she was the analog as the keymaster to Paul Rudd's. Well, she was the gatekeeper. He was the keymaster in the purest 40.
I did like Olivia Wilde as Gozer the Gazarian. I think she really embodied the previous actress that did Gozer.
But I'm surprised, didn't they? I'm trying to remember, so I forget with the first one. But didn't Gozer give them a wish or something? Why were they able to get away?
Choose your destructor.
But how were
Yeah,
they able to? They got to choose their destruction, right?
yeah. Like if you think of it, the destructor will come in the form of who you chose.
So I was,
Maybe because it was not at the altar. That was at the farmhouse. So if it was at the altar, maybe she would have done that.
but they were there at the altar during underneath the cave, right? Wasn't that like the original?
Yeah, but I guess they drew her out. And it was just the one person. I don't know. Maybe she was waiting for an audience before she asked that question.
You were on a writing table, weren't you?
It's funny. Olivia Wilde is not credited, but I think she had more screen time than Bokeem would.
I have to say I like the likeness of Olivia Cooper's of Egon. The CGI on him looking older.
And here's another. Okay, this is dismiss this if you like. This is not exactly related, but I thought when Paul Rudd went straight for the Baskin Robbins at the Walmart, wasn't that a nod to Ant Man? Maybe. And also, he picked the best flavor, Jamocha. Although I don't know how it tastes from the carton at Walmart. I mean, I'm going by when you actually go to the
In the UK, we
ice
don't
cream
get a lot
parlor.
of flavour ice creams.
Oh, I see.
So
Well, Jamocha is basically
that's
coffee.
oh, is it? Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
that would have gone over my head because we just have like chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry.
Ah. But I thought that was neat. It did seem like a reference because he gets the job at Baskin Robbins at the beginning of Ant Man, and then he's going for the, or at least it's well. I wonder how much Baskin Robbins actually paid because that has to be some sort of product placement. But anyway, he grabs the carton and he says, "Oh, Jamocha," and then he goes to the aisle, I guess, to get toppings, and that's where the Stay Puffed Mini Marshmallow Men attack.
They were really cute, the little marshmallows. I had my aunt laughing throughout the whole movie because she thought it was hilarious how they were trying to like be self-destructive. It was so fun.
Yeah, what would everyone say is their favorite part of the movie?
I think my favorite is the Muncher chase scene, and the second is the end fight, especially when you see Gozer trying to regenerate herself. I thought that was a bit scary. And also Egon as well.
Yeah, I appreciated that the whole thing was basically Egon related, just because he was probably my favorite character from the first movie. I mean, also Bill Murray, uh, but this was an Egon movie effectively, and so I did like the granddaughter Phoebe. So pretty much all of her scenes were really good. So I did appreciate the slow build, I guess, or maybe what other people saw as slow, but I liked that uh, character work and those smaller scenes. And of course, as Emma references, that first chase when they're driving down the town with chasing down the Muncher ghost. The ending, it was just it did turn out to be a little bit of a too much of a CG fest for me, and I thought the integration of the old Ghostbusters was a bit awkward. I mean, I know she called, and so they planted the seed that they would show up, but they always just show up right at the right moment, and then them trying to rehash the quotes from the movie, like about asking, "Are you a god?" It just seemed kind of random and overtly fan service, and so that's why I did appreciate more the build up, the less special effects these scenes, just in the more stuff with the daughter, granddaughter, and her going to school and meeting podcast and Paul Rudd and all that. Just the build up was better, so it didn't quite pay off as well as I would have liked based on the build up. But yeah, that Muncher scene though was probably the best part because that's when they're driving through the town. It's in the trailer where they're driving through the town and has the gunner seat and all that. That was probably the most fun scene and not too overwrought in terms of the CG.
Did anyone see the two end credits, the mid credit scene and the end credit scene?
Oh yeah, we always got to make sure to stay in this day and age. It didn't used to be that way, uh, but nowadays you definitely have to wait till the end credits for one of these franchise movies. And the first scene, which is the fun nod to the card guessing game of the first movie, and then the last scene was where they're doing the work of opening it up to future projects. And then there was that blinking light at the very end, the very last shot. And that it wasn't that the storage bay for the ghosts. Does that mean that there was a ghost left over in that storage bay, or did that mean something else?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I thought they sold it to a coffee shop.
Well, he went. I keep wanting to call him by Winston or Ernie Hudson, my uncle. No, he basically he kept paying the bill of it, right? Isn't that what they said at the very end?
He paid for Dan Aykroyd's shop, but then I think he bought the old firehouse in the end. So yeah, that was a bit of a head scratcher to me because I thought it was a Starbucks. So I didn't see the remnants of the Starbucks.
Unless it was, after you move out and they clear it out. I don't know. Maybe it was months later after he bought it. I don't know. I'm trying to cop it.
Yeah, could be. Hey, Dylan, welcome to the stage. We got the over for Ghostbusters, 44 mil.
Oh, is that in the bank? That's done?
Well, it's the estimate. You know how these things go. It will be refined with the actual numbers tomorrow, but yeah, roughly 44. So it got over that 35 on the high end of the industry projection.
Yay!
And we're discussing spoilers, so just fair warning in case you haven't seen the picture.
It's okay. I mean, I could care spoilers, non-spoilers. I still watch it. I had Endgame spoiled for me, so
Oh man, if you can survive that, you can survive.
I wanted to ask everybody what's their feeling about Ivor Shandor being in there in the movie.
I didn't. They didn't do it correct. I feel like if you were gonna have that character in it, then I feel at least give him some type of villain speech, like, "Yes, I'm back. They called me crazy, and now blah 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 blah. You see?" And then maybe if you're gonna have her rip him, maybe I would have had it happen like while he's giving a speech, and she like walks up behind him and then rip him. Because then it's like that's a little bit better. But for him to do that, it was way too cliche. Um, and
I preferred that I didn't see him. I prefer seen and not heard. We knew who he was. We didn't need to. I didn't understand why his body was there and it wasn't destroyed or anything like that or put some.
yeah, they kind of Walt Disney them, you know.
And he was so youthful, like he was still. You know, that that's another one that puzzled me as well. Like how old this? You know, he would be like rotting.
My head canon is just the fact of like maybe so when you're alive, like yes, we get older, but like our soul, our energy, body, whatever, blood pumping, kind of keeps us going and growing, right? So my head canon, my crazy head canon is every time he would come back to life, it would start his heart back up, and so that's why he didn't decay, is because it would keep his body alive just long enough for it not to rot. Because it would they had like earthquakes like every 5 minutes. You would think somebody in the United States would be like, oh wow, this is crazy. We have a lot of earthquakes out of nowhere in this one spot. There's not you know a fault line here. Let's check this out.
Well, Deontay, that somebody was Paul Rudd.
Secret Agent Paul Rudd. Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, that's a good theory about why he did not decay. So
I do like Egon's little basement under I think it's a shed or something. I really like that. It gives me the reminiscence of what the Ghostbusters headquarters was.
Can I I didn't mention it yet, and everyone probably already has, but on the record, I think the main character, McKenna Grace, I think her name is, did an absolute amazing job, just kind of channeling a youthful, Egon, kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like it felt like I could see that being a grandchild of Egon. I thought she did a great job. And I do hope she is in the sequel. I'd rather see her in a sequel movie than a sequel show, if that makes sense.
I would lean towards movie, especially if this box office pans out, simply because Sony doesn't own a streamer, and movies are their main thing. And but if Sony had a streamer, then I would say TV series is more likely. But just the business side of it. Although I'm not ruling out a TV series, and certainly not maybe even a cartoon, as Jay referenced earlier. Uh, but I would expect with box office like this, and if it sustains through the holidays, I would expect a movie sequel.
I wouldn't even know where they would go because my first instinct is for them to go to Warner Brothers, right? To go to HBO Max. But then quickly, I remember no, Spider Man, Marvel. So that's kind of like you can't do that. So
Trying to think if there's anything else to. I mean, we've pretty thoroughly dissected this movie, even some of the small details. From the Crunch Bar to the Twinkie to I guess the Baskin Robbins to um, all
where you're
these.
going to go.
Yeah, right, right. All these nice nods to the original.
Well, how did this movie do in comparison to the first two numbers wise?
Well, totally different era, Deontay,
For
but
sure.
but the
You have to
Ghostbusters.
include the inflations as well.
Right, and there's a lot of ticket price inflation since then. Let me give me a.
Cool. I got you doing homework. That's good.
Oh my gosh, Sony's really kicking ass this year. It's possible that Sony would be the big winner and actually dethrone Disney at the box office.
Without a streaming platform too, Dylan.
Well, we're just talking box office numbers, and I have a bold prediction on what's going to happen in Spider-Man No Way Home. So, they had Venom, this movie, and then they're going to have Spider-Man No Way Home. I think I know.
Oh, please share. Please.
I believe with the multiverse, they are actually going to bring in Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man to help save Peter Parker with all this madness that's happening.
I heard they trying to like bring in the X-Men because of the universes are starting to merge together.
Oh, there was something of a plot leak about that they said they caught enough of and that's why they had to do some reshoots. But it might not actually be Spider-Man No Way Home. That might actually go into Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So the two movies kind of coincide with No Way Home, and will lead into Doctor Strange 2, and the leaks are kind of getting crossed because both movies are going to be so interconnected.
Oh, I see. So, but they have like Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come in. Is he? They definitely are in the picture.
I mean, I can't say, I don't work on the film, so I can't say, oh yeah, I'll tell you guys this. No, but there's been enough
Was it leaked
things.
images?
Yeah, there's enough leaks out there that it's safe to say, and like everybody knew, it was kind of granted that Tobey Maguire is going to be there. And mainly this has to do with Kevin Feige because he worked on the original trilogy. So, the
Oh,
only person that was kind of questionable was Andrew Garfield, whether or not he was going to be in there. Like, it was hands down Tobey Maguire is going to be in it, but it was Andrew Garfield was the
mm,
question because he left on salted terms in essence, because I guess he was guaranteed more movie deals with the Spider-Man franchise, and he got kicked off early. But then this kind of helps Sony in a way
hmm
rebridge those contractual obligations because he's in another Spider.
yeah, because he hasn't had a third movie, hasn't he? Um, he's only had two Amazing Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, he was slated for like 4 or 5. That's what they were really gearing up to and anticipating.
Because they I get the impression that it was so close to they hired Tom Holland. Is it Tom Holland? Yeah, they it's like we just got over Andrew Garfield, and then because of the Marvel universe, Tom Holland came in, and it's like, well, it's only like a couple of years between two different Spider-Mans.
Disney wanted to rush in. I'm not Disney, excuse me. Sony wanted to rush back in because a lot of people did not. I enjoyed it, but a lot of people did not like the Amazing Spider-Man 2. So they were just like, well, do we continue or do we give in? Because Marvel, you got to remember, this is Marvel at peak power right now, right? Um, and so they were just like, well, let's get them in now.
I actually would disagree with that. I mean, if Sony wanted to just do what they wanted to do and say, hey, you know what, we own the movie rights to Spider-Man and we don't want to work with uh, Marvel on doing screen adaptations that are beneficial for both studios, because like even though Disney owns Marvel Studios it is the sub company that's basically handling all the Marvel material. So I think when that situation occurred, uh, it's sort of a spin thing as to say why they had to put a halt instead of going in the direction that they were going in. And with the traction that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was picking up, Kevin Feige probably gave him a call and said, "Hey guys, this is what we're thinking about doing," and they really sat down and did it because they needed Spider-Man in the Infinity Saga because he was a pivotal player um, in the comics version. So I would have to say that if Sony wanted to just say, we will just stay out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they could have totally done it if they wanted to. But I think they got a phone call and said, hey, maybe we should really consider joining up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and uh, work out what deals that we can, because right now Kevin seems to knows what he's doing, and he's like been behind every single Marvel movie, you know. So do you say we'll get back to you? No, they were like, no, let's talk. Let's get to the table. Let's.
Well, it's also lucrative for them, so they have other things that aren't Spider-Man, so it's to the benefit of Sony to make that extra money from the MCU so that they can
and and
make
Sony
things
is
like
part.
the Spider-Verse.
But that's what I'm saying is Sony is part of the MCU now, based on what's happening in Venom. The transition with Spider-Man No Way Home is what it will plan on doing. So you have all those.
But me personally, I can't buy 100% into that. Just looking at how Marvel basically just got me to see Eternals. Nah, in my opinion, they didn't need Sony. If we look back at the time too, if we look at that era, especially for comic books, like people really were going really down on the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and the rumors were like, okay, they're gonna are they gonna keep it? They're gonna reboot because they didn't even make a third movie out of it, and they wanted to jump ship and join into Marvel and be like, all right, let's get into this because it's, as you said, Kevin Feige's been a part of all the Marvel movies, right? And they've been successful. Like I watched Guardians of the Galaxy. Really don't most people don't even know who that is. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's why I'm just thinking if I had to choose the person who needed that relationship more, Sony and Spider-Man needed that combination more.
How I just want to ask, how long do Sony? They got a lease with Spider-Man and Hulk is with Is it Universal?
Yeah, it's you know.
Yeah, and I know that they have to use Spider-Man or something like that. I read about it that it will go back to Marvel or something. Am I?
You're sort of on the right track, and it's a complicated thing to say because with Spider-Man, because he's written material too, and we're talking about the movie rights. So Marvel never got rid of the comic book rights to Spider-Man, so they still produce comic book material on it. These are movie rights, and all it is that if you lay dormant with a IP such as that, there's reversion rights. There's all these things that start coming into play, lawsuits and all this other stuff. So as long as you are, actively making movies um, with the IP, and trying to produce something that is beneficial. And the same thing is that Sony's not going to want to produce a movie that's not going to be a winner or a mega hit, because that would be pointless too. But that's the whole point, is that this happened a lot in the 1990s, that there were like a
They sold some
Fantastic
of
Four.
their characters, didn't they?
I'm sorry.
They sold a lot of their characters. Like Marvel was, I think they were going bankrupt, and they started selling off their characters to different
Yeah.
studios, and then Marvel
Marvel
reestablished.
went down to being a penny stock. Yeah, Marvel went down to as low as to being a penny stock, and you could buy up penny stocks of Marvel. And then they were selling off. They sold off the X-Men. They sold off Spider-Man. They sold off the Hulk. And that's when it dawned on them, uh, which they just had to realize how difficult was it to make a movie, because they make comic books. They don't make movies. So when Kevin Feige was supervising, he wasn't a PGA. He was just someone they sent over from Marvel as a consultant, and he watched the whole movie making process through and through. He's like, I think I can do this. I think we can do this, and that's where the confidence came from. I mean, Blade itself, they sold off Blade, and those movies were from the '90s, so it brought in income for them, and they knew what they were doing to a certain. Well, I mean, they knew what they were doing by selling it off because they needed the money. We had the .com crisis in the late upper '90s, so people were playing into a lot of things that were happening, and this amalgamated mesh allowed for certain properties to be sold off. And now Marvel has the ability that we don't necessarily have to buy it back, but if it's not part of the MCU, it doesn't really do too well. And so, like, the X-Men franchise was not a part of the MCU, and the latter reboots that they tried to do with X-Men First Class to breathe life into it was starting to fail. And was it because of a hands-off approach on their elements? And then when you get into Dark Phoenix, um, they had to actually scrap what the storyline was going to be because it was going to be too closely similar to what was going on with Captain Marvel. So you were going to have two of the exact same story plot lines, which it doesn't. I mean, if you look at it from an adult perspective, that every single character that they write will do one of a couple things, and that one thing is be a super awesome, powerful superhero. And what else is there, right?
And that's unfortunate because Captain Marvel wasn't that good of a movie either. But I think it wasn't just simply the super powered person. It was also, I guess, the scrolls or like the people pretending to be human. And remember, that was a component in Dark Phoenix as well, but not very well fleshed out.
Yeah, they
And
had to get rid of the scroll.
right, and certainly the urge to hold on to movie rights led to Fantastic Four or Fanforstic or whatever you call it from 2015. That was prior to Fox being sold to Disney. Now they don't have to do that anymore. But I just wanted to give an update on what Deontay was asking earlier. And if you do adjust for ticket price inflation, Ghostbusters 2 would have been closer to 70 million today. And its opening would have been like 70 million today. And that first Ghostbusters playing at just 1,300 theaters versus 4,300 for the new one. That first Ghostbusters would have been at least 37 million today. And if you adjust, it did like 13 and change back then. That would be at least 3 times as much today, maybe more if you factor the premium screens, because back then uh, we didn't have IMAX screens everywhere or Dolby screens everywhere. So the ticket prices were pretty standard across the board. So that first Ghostbusters, if you did it based on what the average ticket price for the current Ghostbusters was, it could have been like 50 million. So that first Ghostbusters was playing to packed theaters, unlike this new Ghostbusters, which, or most of these movies. So it's like that 44 million. It's a strong number, but it does mean there are a lot of empty seats. Whereas, the first Ghostbusters, during 13 million on 1,300 theaters, that's a lot of packed theaters. And same with Ghostbusters 2.
Is Ghostbusters? Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask. Is Ghostbusters going to be in cinema for about 45 days? I know that usually they'd be in this, in the movie theater for, was it a couple of months before they go on to different platforms and stuff?
It's going to be, yes, it is an exclusive for theaters, and I think it just will play. I mean, the home release or the VOD release will be dependent on how well it holds up. But it is well positioned to play through the holidays if it can survive that early mid December slump, and then stick in there as Spider-Man is opening, as Matrix is opening, and I did, per the previous conversation, I did link to the Spider-Man franchise. As you can see, how amazing Spider-Man 2 did. I think you know why they stopped making those movies. Uh, Not the kind of dip that they want to see for their top franchise.
So should we take bets about what's going to happen? I'll tell you right now. I think Spider-Man: No Way Home is going to be the taker. Like domestically, it'll do like 200 million.
It's certainly possible. Like as I said before, this the current top movie doing 44 million, that still is leaving a lot of seats on the table. And if any movie people will be willing to be packed like sardines for, it will be Spider-Man: No Way Home. And the Star Wars actually is the benchmark for December. The 4 December Star Wars movies all opened well north of 100 million. Two of them did over 200 million. That Force Awakens did nearly 250, and the Last Jedi did over 200 on its first weekend, and certainly Rogue One did really well, and Rise of Skywalker not so much, but nonetheless did like 170ish. So there is precedent for a picture having a ginormous opening in December, and if anything is going to do it, it's going to be Spider-Man. So it's bold to say 200, but it's not crazy.
If what I said earlier ends up being true in the movie, like droves and droves and droves of people will be.
I have to say, to factor in like the pandemic and the different, especially being international, it might be a bit difficult to get those the numbers.
I mean, especially since Austria just went back into lockdown. I mean, that market is really pivotal towards the global box office.
You're being facetious again, I think, but okay.
Yes, I'm being facetious there, Brandon.
But domestic market, though, we're talking. You're saying you're predicting 200 for the domestic opening, not the worldwide.
Yeah, just domestic. I think it'll clear by the time it's not. I wouldn't say opening 200 million, but I would say by the time December wraps, it'll have done around 200 million because of what's going to be what I predict is going to be inside.
That's globally, you're saying, or domestic?
Domestically only 200 million at least domestically.
Really?
Ah, well, I was about to say, Dylan, if you were just saying 200 for the first weekend alone, I don't think that is crazy. That is not a crazy prediction. So just for that first 3 days or 3.5 because of the Thursday previews, but for that first weekend alone, 200 is not crazy. That is completely viable.
Okay, well there you go. I'll go with that. I'll stick to a 200 million opening weekend because they're not holding anything back on this. They're going all out because my personal feelings was Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. They were just like movies. They were just okay. But like I think they also realized that too, is that even though it did do $1 billion at the box office, that they were just really subpar stories. So with this um No Way Home, I think they need to give him quote unquote closure for the death of Tony Stark. And that's why I think that's going to happen because they kind of set that up in No Way Home. I mean, I'm sorry, they set that up in Far From Home. And that's why my prediction is because of all this multiverse craziness that's happening, they're going to give him that closure to say goodbye.
Are you going?
I was about to say, though, that would be an extremely stuffed movie, maybe an overstuffed movie.
They've actually said that they've like literally they've brought everything into this. All the sinks are being thrown, not just.
I'm just afraid that we'll have another Spider-Man 3 problem of too many things happening, because if we're going off just rumors, right, which isn't spoiler, just rumors, if we're going off that, so you have the 3 Spider-Men, right? Then you have the 5 villains, potentially a 6 if they add Mysterio or Venom in it. And then you have the Daredevil rumors, right? And then so now you're saying Tony Stark. That's even if it's just a little bit, it is a lot.
I think they're just going to be outnumbered with the number. So we have like the Sinister Six, five, whatever, but there's probably going to be like more villains because it like there's a lot going on, and what they're showing us is going to pale in comparison to where it's going to go. So even with like, I think the problem with Spider-Man 3 having too many villains, which they had 3, was that he was alone. And then even with having, James Franco's pseudo goblin, come to help him, so it was 2 on 3. It's because uh Franco's character wasn't really established as any type of um villain or hero, so it becomes sort of a unaccepted plot point. Now it's just a story of convenience. Whereas we're gonna have 3 Spider-Man versus 5 or 6 villains, and ultimately, that might not be enough. And you got Electro and the Sandman, and in full power. So they have to give him a heartfelt moment. You see what I'm saying? So uh, you know, Robert Downey Jr. making a cameo appearance one more time Uh, I mean, when someone says they're throwing everything, you know, I wouldn't put it past them then to put that in.
Gary, are you gonna say something? I saw you on mute. Or well, I was I was just gonna say I get what you're saying. I could see them doing something where kind of like in Flashpoint, where at the end Batman had a letter from his parents. I could see something like that, but full on Tony, maybe. Uh, but I will say one good thing about having all these characters that helps is the fact that you already had them pre-established in other movies. Whether you didn't like it or you did like it, their backstory is there. So I will say that does make the the weight of it a little bit lighter. But then it's like you're depending on these people to watch those movies to kind of understand.
Oh, and when they make movie for adults, you know, so because the kids will never understand it because in that capacity, Deontay, they're making movie for adults at that point. So you know, yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, but how many? I get that, but I have a lot of friends who haven't seen the Amazing Spider-Man. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying there. At this point, the moment you do that, you're linking in five different franchises. Shoot, you have even in the MCU, you have people complaining about overstuffs, and this is a more of a concurrent story where you have constant themes and people characters that are carried throughout the whole thing. This is kind of like jump ship. So I get what you're saying, where like it's adult stuff, but there are plenty of people of an older age that haven't seen both Toby or
Right. Yeah,
Well,
they're already dealing with a lot. I mean, Dylan, I like where your head's at about throwing everything in, plus the kitchen sink and beyond. But I also think that Kevin Feige and the MCU, if they ever are going to bring Iron Man back, I think they would reserve that for a different movie, maybe a movie that might need more help getting off the ground, whether it's their next team up movie or something like that. That's a card you can only play one more time, and I don't think they're going to play it this early. I just would be very surprised.
Brandon, to counterpoint that is the fact that Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark has such a presence. It's not something that you know you want to let go. So for Robert Downey Jr., it's like, oh yeah, I get to collect another paycheck, and I don't have to put in full time work for the movie. I don't have to have a major role in it. But just him cameoing in that situation, he's probably gonna make like who knows 20-30 million, and then on the back end with royalties. Because I'm saying that everything that they're so it's kind of like if you wait too long, you're going like I'll tell you right now, it's been a long winter. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. And 2019, April 2019, that feels like eons ago, right? So to allow, you know, uh, from just a pull perspective, to diminish because will Tony Stark Iron Man matter 5 years from now? That's where I would put the defense in that if they have him cameo, and there's been a Anthony Russo did a little article thing where he's saying that they revealed um their ultimate plan was to make Tom Holland the heart of the MCU, and he said something of on the lines of passing the torch to Tom Holland essentially. And you didn't really get that from Far From Home because what's missing is again, like I said, that closure feature. So that's why I'm going with my bold prediction that they're being magicians. They're saying, look at all these things, look at all this stuff that we're dropping, and um, they're gonna have to pass the torch officially on somehow, and that's what my predictions.
Well, fair enough. I mean, we can agree to disagree because I think they already passed the torch, at least as far as I'm concerned. But and I don't see how it serves the MCU per se to do it now because everyone's going to see Spider-Man anyway. And it's going to be such a busy movie, and I am concerned that it will be another Spider-Man 3 or Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was also a rather stuffed picture, overstuffed, some might say, and let's hope they're not making that mistake again.
I think it'll work out though. Like I think what we have now. Oh my bad, Brandon. Were you finished?
Oh yeah,
Or-
go ahead.
Okay, I just want to double check. I think what we have now. I agree with Dylan. What we have right now, I think, will work. Like you said, with the whole adult element, a lot of people seeing this have most likely seen it. I just know people that haven't, right? So I'm just saying that. But once we start adding more, which there are rumors of more, Tony Stark may, that could be a potential rumor, but there are rumors of other people being in this, even other Spider-Mans. I've seen crazy rumors as much as Spider-Man, was it 2099 or whatever? I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. If they start adding too much to it, you start throwing too many sinks, you're going to have a flood in the house. And I just think we have to be really careful about how much we're stuffing this thing. I know Thanksgiving is coming up, but you don't want to stuff it too much, buddy. All right?
I got the impression that they're trying to do like an Avengers team up in the movies with Spider-Man, but you've got these villains that have so much weight in their story in comparison with their protagonist, which is Spider-Man, which feels a bit very heavy. Like you said, if there's too many villains in a movie, it can get problematic. So I believe that they're trying to do a part two with Doctor Strange with the multiverse madness, because some of the trailers does kind of leave you on a cliffhanger. They might do it, in the ending, or they might just leave you wait for the next, this.
Oh, that would be interesting. At the very least, they will put Doctor Strange on a cliffhanger, so then you'll be excited for his movie next year.
Oh, and the other thing too is if you ever had to give, so as we seen from the second trailer that they released, um Tom Holland has motivation for the villains to not send them to their deaths because Spider-Man's supposed to stand for something such as helping people, right? So if you introduce this Tony Stark feature that I'm talking about, um can he really undo the multiverse that's happening, this multiversal collision? Because then he would be sending Tony Stark to his.
Well, yeah. I mean, it could. I see what you're saying, Dylan. It's just again, business side. I'm not sure they're going to play that card, but and they're already doing a lot in one movie. I mean, is how long is this movie going to be? Uh, uh, I mean, Eternals was 2 hours and 35 minutes or so, and people thought that was an eternity. So, what will they think of Spider Man? I know they'll want more as much as they can. I mean, Endgame was 3 hours, but I mean, I don't know. Every superhero movie has to be like this grand finale, this big world ending event or multi-dimensional event. Um, they have to save some powder for the next one. Um, I mean, where do they go from there? I mean, they already have this problem with Endgame, which was such a emotional resolution for most casual fans, at least. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. If it was me, I just wouldn't. I wouldn't empty the chamber so quickly. But there will be plenty of Spider-Man talk to come. I mean, it is going to be the biggest movie of the year, and even if it doesn't get to $200 million on its opening weekend, it's going to have an enormous opening, almost certainly to be the first $100 million plus opener of the year of the pandemic. It's something to look forward to and will be a real test of where we're at the box office. One of our biggest tests yet, because now we have a movie that everybody wants to see, not just some big movies that some people want to see, like we've had. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
Guys, I gotta see you later. Because I got work tomorrow. But good night, everyone. Take it easy.
All right, you too, Emma. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, good night.
All right, see ya.
All right. So, a couple of other fun things. Tomorrow, the 22nd, is the 25th anniversary of Jingle All the Way and Star Trek First Contact. Just a FYI, both of those pictures came out in 1996, holiday releases, and it's also the 30th anniversary of the live action Addams Family movie, which was a big hit back in November of 1991. So just an FYI there. And as we discussed earlier, Netflix has attempted to do more, attempted to be a little more transparent and has released their top 10 most viewed website, basically charting their top 10 most viewed movies and shows on a global basis. And actually, it goes back a few months. You could actually click back and see how things progress. I'm going to update the link here. So to see if there's anything interesting there, at the very least, it's a start to getting maybe a titch more transparency. Or although we could argue, is it more transparency or just a form of obfuscation? I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. See for yourself. They haven't updated it yet. It's still at November 14th, so I imagine the update will be soon. But Red Notice was their number one movie in its debut week with 149 million hours viewed. That's their new metric. Gone is the if they watch 2 minutes, it counts as a view. Now it's hours viewed. So 148 million, 149 million. So that's a 2 hour movie. So they're saying effectively in the first week that nearly 74 million accounts watched the movie in its first week.
I don't think I don't think they should have released that though. I don't know, part of the mystery being there about how do they measure, because now doing that they can be ripped apart. Be like, oh, that's a dumb way to measure. And if you look at all the other streaming services, they didn't release it, so their hand is still hidden. So they can say, oh yeah, that is a dumb way to measure. Netflix shouldn't do it that way. And it's
I
like, well,
find
how do
it
you measure?
interesting though, Deontay, that this is coming out after I had exposed in a different room that Netflix had been lying all this time, saying that as a new media format, it's hard to tabulate, their results. And I was like, you guys are being lied to. Computer science is the most accurate. I said Google didn't become $1 billion company because it didn't know how to monitor a click. So they're putting out an hours viewed so that they can probably put up this is about royalties, that's why. So Netflix was under scrutiny. Netflix is a leader on this in the streaming platform. How do you say that a new media, which is not technically a new media because it's computer science, computer data, makes it impossible for us to relegate what your royalties are going to be because they did buyouts on a lot of actors that normally rely on royalties to carry them through because buyouts normally pay out less in the long run. So they're putting up this hours viewed. We're gonna say, hey, you have to be viewed the entire hour. So when you take a look at it, when networks buy a movie like TNT, well, they'll put a movie into syndication, or TNT buys a television series to put into syndication that's from a network. That's money on the board. That's gonna get played. Whether you tune in to watch it on the network doesn't matter because it was paid for to play for that hour. So Netflix is throwing out hours viewed, so that they can say, hey, it's not just that it gets clicked on and watched for a couple minutes. They're trying to get ahead of the shitstorm that they created over the last pending strike, which hasn't been resolved with IATSE. IATSE is still taking the agreement or bargaining thing and they can still strike if they want to come end of December. But the statement that this new media, new metric, and it's impossible for us to relegate the royalties, that's why they're doing this hours viewed and being transparent, because they've been lying all this time.
So you're saying this would appease the talent? You're saying so we're gonna, if they want to make a deal, we'll pay you by hour viewed, or
Correct, because if you take a look at it, this is to get ahead and control the situation. So instead of just, how do we determine that what, the portion that was your role that you spoke and we clicked on that and that's why you should get paid a royalty. They want to say, hey, it has to be hours viewed and we'll pay out a royalty. So they're creating the standard, the format. That's what they're trying to get ahead of right now. And well, now, how does this play into with television shows that are only 30 minutes long? If they have an hours viewed, you see what I'm saying? So now does someone have to watch the show twice in order for it to be considered? I'm just kidding on that, but Netflix was the biggest source of the scrutiny on the IATSE strike. I mean, literally, I was just talking to somebody that is trying to hire for a Netflix movie. They want to hire me, but not at the rate, which again is a thing that Netflix does. Is they like to pay bare bottom wages for people to perform a service during production of a movie. And the problem is, can I really be anywhere near on set? And when a problem arises, even though I have the credentials to speak to certain things, well, you're not paying me. That's above my pay grade. Do I get to say that? And the answer is I don't. I don't get to say and pick and choose based on my knowledge base that, oh, I'm not going to say something about what's going on here, but I can only say that, hey, I can't accept that as my pay. That's way, way below what you're getting out of a qualified person such as myself.
Hey guys, I'm about to head out. I appreciate the dope talk and conversation, Brandon and Jalen and everyone else there earlier. But yeah, I'll head out. Hope you guys have a good night.
all right, cool. Thanks for dropping by, Deontay. Always appreciate your contributions
Appreciate it.
to the conversation. All right. This will be an ongoing talk about the Netflix ratings, the transparency in the streaming world. As Dylan was saying, they do have the data. That's not the question. The question is, what data do they want to share? What's the most strategic for them? What's most appeasing for the talent? But it's not as complicated as they often make it sound. Box office itself is in effect a measurement of popularity. So you could easily parse the data or deliver the data in a way just to suggest how many people watch something. They have the data. They're math geniuses. This is not something that they would have a problem doing. It's just more about the will. So I appreciate that this might be a step in the right direction in terms of will. It is interesting to see here that you have, like I said, you have Red Notice, which would suggest that the movie was viewed a total of 74 million times because it's a roughly 2 hour movie and had 149 million hours of view time, which I don't know exactly how many people that is, or if any people are watching over and over again. Again, this is data that they have that they could parse, and that's the point where we would like to get to, is where we can just have a straightforward viewership count. Maybe at some point in the future we come up with a methodology or a system or a type of rating point to get the message across as to what is truly being watched. And then the ultimate goal is to have it all folded into a universal list so that we can include Disney and Hulu and Amazon and everything. That would be the ultimate goal. And so this could be a step towards that. Other streamers are probably more hesitant because you don't have the same amount of hours viewed as Netflix here. But that's where we're at. And I just thought it was important to note that they debuted that this week. So we will be revisiting these Netflix stats and other streaming stats in the future because that's all part of the game here. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up things. We talked extensively about Ghostbusters Afterlife. Again, a solid debut with an estimated $44 million. Big comeback for that franchise. And we will see how it holds up to determine whether the franchise is truly resurrected and if we'll get another movie. I think the general sense of the movie was that it was a good movie and worth seeing, especially if you've seen the first Ghostbusters. And I would concur. Happy to talk about it in a future broadcast of the box office revival here. That being said, I think we will wrap it up now. So thank you all for coming and listening, and we'll be here next Sunday with the Thanksgiving box office results and other goodies. So until next time, remember, those theaters for Ghostbusters, they're not half empty, three quarters empty. No, they're one quarter full. They're half full, just the way you look at it. Anyway, box office, it's coming back, baby. So we'll see you next time at the box office revival.